Hello everyone and welcome back to the Horror Hut. Before you drift off, it would be a nice idea if you could leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from. Please don't forget to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Right, let's get comfy and relaxed, and let's begin. Story 1, Shadows in the Night Shift. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as I trudged through the sterile corridors of Woodhaven Hospital. It was just past midnight, and the stillness of the building enveloped me like a suffocating shroud. The soft beeping of machines and the distant hum of the air conditioning were the only reminders that I was not entirely alone. I had been a nurse for 3 years, but the late night shift always wore on my nerves, especially in this old place filled with creaking floors and shadowy corners. I stifled a yawn while glancing at the clock on the wall. It ticked steadily, a reminder that time dragged on at the witching hour. My first patient of the night, an elderly man with pneumonia, had finally settled into a fitful sleep, and I sighed with relief. I made my rounds, checking on the few other patients in the small ward. They were all quiet, lost in their dreams or the haze of painkillers. But something felt off tonight. The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It was probably just the isolation of the night shift playing tricks on my mind, but I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder as I walked. It all began when I received the first text. It arrived just after I settled down at the nurse's station, ready to document the night's events. The message was simple and chilling. I see you. The number was unrecognizable, a series of digits that meant nothing to me. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach and glanced around, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. Of course, there was only the dim light of the hallway and the quiet hum of the hospital. I tried to dismiss it as a prank or a wrong number. We all joked about getting weird texts, especially during a shift as drab as this one. I returned to my paperwork, but the weight of that message settled heavily on my mind. An hour later, the second text came. You should check your window. My heart raced. I hadn't thought much about the window in the break room, a small pane of glass that faced a darkened parking lot. I couldn't remember if I had locked it before my shift began. A chill crept up my spine, and I found myself glancing outside, half expecting to see someone standing there, staring back at me. I shook my head, trying to clear the irrational thoughts. It must have been a prank or some twisted joke. As I continued my shift, I tried to focus on the patients, but the texts kept coming. I'm closer than you think, read the third. Each message twisted the knife of paranoia deeper into my gut. I tried to console myself with reason, but the sense of dread only grew. I texted my friend Jenna, who worked the day shift, hoping she would have a logical explanation. My fingers hesitated over the screen, but I finally typed, getting weird texts. Can you check in on me later? The clock struck 2. I stepped away from the nurse's station to refill my coffee, needing a moment to breathe. The coffee machine gurgled in the small break room, the sound oddly comforting in the suffocating silence. As I stood there, I peered out the window, the darkness outside impenetrable. But then my heart stopped. There, at the edge of the hospital's dimly lit parking lot, I thought I saw a figure. I squinted, trying to make out more. The figure stood still, shrouded in shadow, but the way it seemed to be looking towards the hospital sent chills racing down my spine. A cold sweat broke out on my brow as I reached for my phone to text Jenna again. But the device slipped from my fingers, the clatter echoing loudly in the silence. When I bent to pick it up, the figure was gone. I straightened up, panic clawing at my throat. Had I imagined it? I hesitated, the weight of the text pressing down on me. I rationalized away my fear. Perhaps it was just a passerby or someone waiting for a ride. But deep down, I felt the shadows growing thicker, almost suffocating. Back at the nurse's station, I grabbed my phone, checking for any new messages. Nothing. I swiped through my contacts, considering calling Jenna. Suddenly, the phone vibrated violently in my hand. The screen lit up with a new message. I'm inside. A wave of terror washed over me. It was impossible. The doors were locked. I stumbled back, knocking the chair over as a sense of urgency surged through me. I glanced around the station, searching for something, anything, to arm myself. I reached for the small emergency button under the desk and pressed it. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. My heart raced, pounding in my ears. I stood frozen, every instinct screaming to run. But where? The hospital was a maze of sterile hallways and closed doors. I had to know if someone was really inside. I edged toward the doorway, pushing it open just enough to peek into the corridor. Silence met me, an oppressive quiet heavy with dread. I stepped outside, my breath shallow and quick. I could feel the darkness wrapping around me, thick as fog, and the hairs on my arms stood on end. With each step, I felt the weight of unseen eyes, my mind racing with nightmare scenarios. Hello? I called out, my voice shaky. No response, just the echo of my own voice swallowed by the night. And then, from the corner of my eye, I spotted movement, a fleeting shadow darting behind a corner. I turned, adrenaline surging through my veins. I had to get to the nearest exit. I sprinted down the hall, heart pounding, knowing I was now alone. The hum of fluorescent lights droned over the hospital corridors, draping the building in an eerie brightness that did little to chase away the shadows lingering in the corners. I had grown accustomed to the silence that wrapped itself around the night shift, a blanket of solitude punctuated only by the distant beeping of monitors and the soft shuffle of nurses' shoes against the linoleum floor. But that night was different. The familiar sounds felt amplified, as if the building itself was breathing down my neck. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. The screen illuminated my face, revealing a text from an unknown number. My heart sank when I read it. I can see you. The words clawed at the edges of my sanity. I glanced outside the window, half expecting to see someone lurking just beyond the glass, but the night remained still, a black void interrupted only by the flickering streetlight below. I had just finished my rounds on the second floor, where I had checked on Mrs. Gibbons, the old woman with pneumonia who usually ranted about the injustices of her life. She was quiet now, her chest rising and falling rhythmically as she slept. I shouldn't be feeling jumpy over a simple prank text, I told myself that incessantly, but the hair on my arms stood on end. Shaking my head, I tucked the phone safely into my scrubs and resumed my duties. The nurse's station was empty when I returned, the only light coming from the monitors that displayed patient statuses like blinking stars in a night sky. I tried to focus on the charts before me, but the text replayed in my mind, taunting me. After a few moments, I decided to respond, not that I expected a civil exchange. I typed back, "Who is this?" and pressed send, already regretting it. A second buzz followed almost immediately. "Look outside." My stomach dropped. I glanced cautiously out the window again, my heartbeat quickening. The yard was deserted, the shadows blending into one another like dark smoke. My breathing quickened. Had someone really been watching me? I didn't want to believe it, but a primal instinct had started to tug at the back of my mind, urging me to be wary. The hospital, for all its dim lights and sterile decor, had never felt hostile. But in that moment, it transformed into a labyrinth of dread, each corner hiding unseen eyes. I shoved my phone into my pocket, determination battling with fear. I needed to check the perimeter, make sure the grounds were secure. As I stepped into the hallway, the silence settled around me again, thickening the air. I moved toward the emergency exit, where the emergency lights cast ominous shadows that seemed to dance on the walls. Outside, a chill crept into the air, whispering promises of danger. I opened the door slowly, the heavy metal creaking like a groan in the night. The yard lay before me, the grass damp from the earlier rain, the moonlight casting pallid beams across the ground. I stepped out, my footsteps muffled by the earth. The cool air brushed against my skin, a reminder that I was alive, but it did little to calm the growing anxiety tightening my chest. I scanned the area, searching for any sign of movement. Just as I was about to turn back inside, a flicker of movement caught my eye. My heart raced as I squinted into the shadows surrounding the building. There, near the edge of the parking lot, a dark figure stood partially hidden behind a tree. My breath hitched, the figure appeared motionless, but there was something distinctly unnatural about it. "Hello?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. Silence answered me, heavy and oppressive. No response. No indication that anyone was there. I took a cautious step forward, my instinct screaming at me to run, but curiosity pushed me onward. I pulled out my phone, the light from the screen illuminating my shaking hands. I aimed it toward the shadow, trying to pierce the darkness. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice sounding weak even to my own ears. The figure shifted, a slight movement that sent adrenaline surging through me. I turned to retreat back inside, but stumbled as the phone slipped from my grasp, clattering to the ground. The screen shattered, leaving a web of cracks behind. I swore under my breath and bent down to pick it up when I noticed the figure moving closer. Panic engulfed me like a tidal wave, and I scrambled up, fear propelling me back toward the hospital doors. Just as I reached the threshold, my phone buzzed violently in my pocket. I ripped it out and glanced at the new message, "I'm closer than you think." That's when I felt it, a presence behind me, a heavy weight that pressed against my back. I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach as I faced the darkness again. But there was no one there. Just the empty yard, the ghostly shadows taunting me with their silence. I slammed the door shut, locking it with trembling fingers, and stumbled back to the safety of the nurse's station. I leaned against the desk, my heart racing as I tried to catch my breath. The text messages kept flooding my mind, a relentless reminder that I was not alone. Whoever was out there was playing a sick game with me. I had to get through the shift, had to survive until dawn when the daylight would chase away the shadows lingering just outside. I reached for the phone again, the daylight breaking in my mind like a distant promise, but as I glanced at the screen, I saw that my last message had not sent. The number flashed ominously, blank and empty, and suddenly I realized the silence had grown louder, and the shadows were moving. The fluorescent lights flickered above me as I pushed open the heavy double doors leading to the hospital's break room. The clock on the wall read 2:07 a.m., a time that felt both unreal and achingly familiar. The air was thick with the sterile smell of antiseptic, a stark reminder that I was trapped in a world of illness and pain. I had just finished my rounds, the quiet halls echoing with the hushed beeps of the monitors and the occasional distant moan of a patient. I pulled out my phone, half expecting another message from the unknown number. The first two had been unsettling enough, but the third had tipped me over the edge into paranoia. Each message had come in quick succession, like a taunt from a shadow lurking just beyond my reach. "Leave now," it had said simply, devoid of context or emotion. I felt a chill creep down my spine as I recalled the way my pulse quickened each time I glanced out the small window in the nurse's station, half expecting to see someone standing at the edge of the parking lot, watching. Of course, there had been no one there, just the wavering silhouette of the trees swaying under the moonlight. The break room was empty. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the bitter scent momentarily dissipating my unease. I took a long sip, feeling the hot liquid down my throat, hoping it would chase away the weariness that had settled like a weight on my shoulders. I sank into the small couch, its fabric worn and frayed, a small oasis in the endless sea of night shifts and relentless responsibilities. I opened my phone again, scrolling through the messages, my heart pounding with every ping. "Do you like your job?" Soon, you'll be free. Just a little longer. I was being toyed with, and the realization filled me with dread. Who was this person? What did they want? A sudden sound behind me made my heart leap. I turned, half expecting to see a fellow nurse, but the room was still. The hum of the refrigerator was the only noise, a low, mechanical drone that enveloped me. I took a deep breath and tried to calm down. I had to focus. There were patients who needed me. I stood, leaving the coffee cup behind, and headed towards my next patient room. The walls felt like they were closing in, the flickering lights creating shadows that danced along the hallway. I pushed open the door to room 302, where Mrs. Hall lay sleeping, her chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. I checked the 4-drip and ensured her vitals were stable. As I glanced at the monitors, something outside caught my eye. I turned towards the window, my breath hitching in my throat as I peered out into the dim parking lot. The beam of the security lights barely penetrated the darkness, but I could have sworn I saw a figure standing by the trees. I shook my head, trying to dispel the image. It was just my mind playing tricks on me. My phone buzzed again in my pocket, a sharp reminder of my mounting anxiety. I pulled it out, my heart racing. "Look behind you." The message sent icy tendrils of fear creeping down my spine. I spun around, heart pounding, but the room remained empty. The door was closed, the shadows lengthening in the corners like fingers reaching out for me. I darted back to the door and peered through the small window. The hallway was deserted, yet the feeling of being watched enveloped me again. I could almost feel ice boring into my back, an unwelcome presence that set my skin crawling. I stepped into the corridor, trying to shake off the feeling of dread that clung to me like a second skin. Glancing at the windows as I walked, I saw nothing but darkness, the trees swaying as if they shared a secret that I was not privy to. "I'm being ridiculous," I muttered to myself, but deep down I knew it wasn't just nerves. There was something wrong, something lurking just beyond the fringes of my exhausted mind. After a few minutes, I forced myself to the nurse's station. I couldn't let this consume me. I took a seat, hoping the comfort of familiarity would chase away the shadows. I pulled out my phone again, staring at the screen as if it held the answers. But with the next message that appeared, my blood ran cold. "I can see you." I dropped the phone, my hands trembling. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was rooted in place by sheer terror. I darted my eyes around the dimly lit station, searching for something, anything, that could confirm or deny the message. I stood up, clenching my fists as a surge of adrenaline propelled me forward. I had to confront whatever this was. I turned and headed back towards the break room, needing to regroup. As I entered, the door creaked ominously behind me, and I felt the weight of the darkness pushing in, threatening to suffocate me. A gust of cold air swept through the room, and I froze. The temperature had dropped suddenly, chills racing up and down my spine. Then I saw it, a fleeting shadow darting past the window outside. My heart raced as I rushed to the glass, pressing my forehead against it. I strained to see through the murky night, my breath fogging the window, but nothing moved. The parking lot was still again, too still. With shaky hands, I pulled out my phone and texted back, hoping to regain some control. "Who are you?" The response came almost instantly, "Your worst nightmare." I dropped the phone onto the couch, my heart pounding louder now. I had to leave, to get out of this suffocating hospital before whatever was lurking out there decided to take a more active interest in me. I gripped the edge of the couch, fear clawing at my insides as the realization hit me. This was no longer a game. I pushed myself to the door, my pulse hammering in my ears as I prepared to face the night, to step out into the unknown darkness that awaited me just beyond these walls. The fluorescent lights above flickered like broken stars as I approached the nurse's station. The glow washed over the dull linoleum floor, turning the mundane into something unsettling. Night shifts had always felt eerie, but this one had an unusual weight, as if the air itself thickened with each passing hour. I rubbed my eyes, willing away the worn-out fatigue, when my phone buzzed again. I glanced down at the screen. Another message from the unknown number. It had become a ritual of sorts, this uninvited digital intrusion. You shouldn't be alone. The words sent a shiver through me, a tangible chill that settled in the pit of my stomach. I had received the first text just after midnight, around the same time I was alone in the break room, my shadow flickering against the walls as I poured a cup of coffee. At first, I'd brushed off the messages as a prank, some sick joke on the part of bored colleagues. But the following texts had escalated, intensifying the knot in my throat. "I see you," another one had read, accompanied by a photo of the hospital's main entrance, taken from a distance. I had been standing just inside, unaware that someone was lurking beyond. I glanced out the window, half expecting to see someone staring back. The night was suffocatingly dark, only the dim glow of the streetlights fought to illuminate the surrounding parking lot. My heart raced as I thought back to the footsteps I had heard echoing outside earlier, the low thud drowned out by the hum of machines and the rhythmic beeping of monitors. I returned to my desk, holding my breath as I forced myself to concentrate on the patient chart sprawled before me. Routine vitals. Medications administered. A simple checklist to drown out the rising tide of dread. I picked up my pen, but my fingers trembled. The texts were not just words, they were a reminder that someone was watching, waiting for a moment to strike. The hours dragged on, the silence of the hospital amplifying the claustrophobia surrounding me. I could hear the soft rustle of the wind outside, but my thoughts drowned it out. I texted Sarah, my friend from the day shift. "I'm getting weird texts. Can you stop by? Just for a minute?" I hit send, feeling foolish. She'd probably laugh it off, roll her eyes and tell me to stop watching horror movies before bed. When I looked at the clock, it had barely been 5 minutes since I sent the message. The break room felt more isolating than before. Its heavy door creaked ominously as I stepped inside. The only sound was the gentle whir of the coffee machine, a mechanical heartbeat keeping time with my anxiety. I poured another cup, desperate for a distraction, when my phone vibrated again. I bated my breath. "You think she'll come for you?" The sinister tone gripped my throat like a vice. Panic surged, and I fumbled my coffee cup. It clattered to the ground, splattering hot liquid across the floor. I knelt down, frantically wiping at the mess with paper towels, but I couldn't shake the sensation that every swipe brought me closer to something malevolent. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the hallway. My heart leapt into my throat as I froze, staring wide-eyed at the break room door. Hadn't I just heard footsteps? If someone was playing a prank, it was escalating rapidly. I stood, my legs shaky as I tiptoed to the door, my heart thrumming in my ears. Peering into the corridor, I saw the stark white walls lining the dimly lit hall. Nothing seemed amiss, but the air felt charged. The sound had come from the direction of the entrance. A cold sweat formed as I grasped the edge of the door's frame, ready to bolt if necessary. I forced myself to step into the hall, my pulse echoing with each cautious heartbeat. The faint glow of the emergency exit sign illuminated the path ahead, but shadows danced in the corners of my vision. The stillness was palpable. It swallowed the usual sounds of the hospital, making the atmosphere heavy, tangible. I moved toward the entrance, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. I spotted a dark shape just beyond the glass doors. I couldn't make out any features, only the outline of a figure standing motionless in the shadows. My breath caught as my skin prickled with the sensation of being scrutinized. My phone buzzed again in my pocket, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. "Do you like what you see?" My eyes widened, a sickening realization washing over me. This person was watching me. I didn't respond. I turned my back on the door, facing the safety of the corridor, but the figure remained, a part of the night that refused to fade. I made a beeline for the nurse's station, adrenaline coursing through my veins. My thoughts raced, each one suffocating the last in a frenzy of fear. I reached for the desk phone, my hands trembling as I dialed security. "Hello," a calm voice answered, cutting through my chaos. "There's someone outside," I gasped, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I think they're watching me." "Stay where you are." "I'll send someone," the operator replied, but their voice felt distant, floating into the cacophony brewing in my mind. I took a step back, glancing again toward the entrance. The figure was gone. I blinked, suddenly doubting my own sanity. Had I imagined it? The reality seemed too surreal, each moment a delicate balance between the tangible and the terrifying. Yet the gnawing sensation of eyes upon me lingered, relentless and suffocating. Moments stretched into eternity as I waited. I was just about to head back to the break room when the lights flickered again. This time, they dimmed, plunging the hallway into a thick darkness. I cursed under my breath, my heart racing as I strained to hear any sound, footsteps, whispers, anything that might hint at who or what was nearby. A flicker of movement caught my eye. My breath hitched as I turned toward the source, but it was nothing more than the flickering light playing tricks on my mind. Just as I was about to dismiss it, I heard a soft, raspy laughter echo from the shadows outside, chilling me to the bone. I stumbled back, my pulse quickening, knowing all too well that whatever was lurking out there was all too real. The fluorescent lights flickered above me, their rhythmic hum drowning out the distant sounds of the hospital, an occasional beeping monitor, the rustle of nurses' scrubs, and the tread of tired feet on linoleum. I stood at the nurses' station, the clock reading 2:13 a.m. The night shift had always felt like a blur, but tonight, every minute stretched painfully, each second weighed down by an unshakable dread that crept into my bones. I glanced at my phone, once again, hoping for some distraction or reassurance. My heart tightened as I read the latest message from the unknown number, another taunt, "You have no idea what's coming." It sent a chill racing through me, and I fought the urge to throw my phone against the wall. This was the third text in a matter of hours, and the sender remained as elusive as the shadows lurking outside. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of fear. I was a professional, a caretaker. I had patients relying on me, and I couldn't let a series of text messages derail my focus. I pushed the thoughts aside and returned to the tasks at hand, checking on the patients in my care, ensuring their comfort. But every time I entered a darkened room, I felt a prickling sensation, as if something or someone was lingering just beyond the threshold, watching and waiting. As I walked down the dim corridor toward room 213, the air felt heavier, like the atmosphere before a storm. I paused, adjusting the cuff of my scrub top, and took a deep breath. The light flickered again, and I turned my head toward the window. It was blanked by darkness, the glass reflecting only a hush version of my own anxious face. The day shift nurse had mentioned something about the security cameras, how they had been malfunctioning lately. My stomach knotted as I thought about being alone in a building with no eyes watching over me. I pushed the thought away and pushed open the door to room 213, where Mr. Turner lay, his breathing steady but shallow. I checked his whispered a few comforting words, and turned to leave, but something made me pause. A noise came from outside, a soft shuffle, almost imperceptible. I opened the door wider and peered into the murky corridor. Nothing moved. I shook my head again, trying to dispel the unease that clung to me like a shroud. Just my imagination, I reassured myself. I made my way back to the nurse's station, but the feeling of being watched intensified with every step. It was then that my phone vibrated again, a sharp reminder of the unseen tormentor. My hands trembled as I took it out, the brightness of the screen cutting through the dim light. "You're alone. I can see you," the text read. panic wrapped around my throat like a vice. I glanced around the station, the shadows deepening in the corners, the emptiness palpable. I called my supervisor, but the line was dead. With a sigh of resignation, I sent a quick message to my friend Alex, asking him to check on me in a bit. As I hit send, my eyes caught movement outside the window, just a flicker in the dark, but enough to send my heart racing. I couldn't see clearly, but I could feel the weight of someone watching me through the glass. The temperature in the room dropped, and I rubbed my arms, wrestling against the creeping chill. I tried to convince myself it was just the air conditioning kicking in, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone stood beyond the safety of the walls, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. My phone buzzed again. This time, the message was different. "Look outside." With a heavy heart pounding in my chest, I turned toward the window. The moon illuminated the parking lot, but shadows danced among the trees lining the edge. I squinted, trying to make out any figures, any signs of movement. And there it was, a silhouette, just within the tree line, barely visible against the night. My breath quickened as I took a step closer, my fingers brushing the window pane. The figure shifted slightly, and I froze. It was too dark to make out any features, but I felt it, an awareness that pierced through the veil of night. Whoever it was, they knew I was watching. My heart thundered in my chest as the figure leered at me, an ominous presence that filled me with dread. My instinct screamed to run, to retreat to the safety of the hospital, but my feet felt glued to the floor. I couldn't break eye contact, as if the figure had cast a spell, holding me captive in a world of terror. Then, abruptly, it turned and vanished into the night, melted away among the trees. I stumbled back from the window, gasping. My phone buzzed again, but I couldn't bring myself to look. I bolted to the hallway, my mind racing, every step echoing like thunder in my ears. I had to find someone, anyone. The nurse's station felt like a tomb, an empty shell that offered no comfort. The hallway stretched before me, dark and unwelcoming. I darted past the patient rooms, my heart pounding with each footfall. Just as I reached the end of the corridor, the lights flickered once more, plunging me momentarily into darkness. Panic surged as I pressed my back against the wall, waiting for the light to return, for the shadows to reveal their secrets. When the light stabilized, I sprinted toward the exit, desperate to escape the suffocating atmosphere that threatened to consume me. I needed to breathe, to feel the cool night air on my skin, to break free from the confines of the hospital. But as I reached the door, it swung open in front of me, and there stood Alex, his eyes wide with concern. "What's wrong?" he asked, but I didn't have the words to explain. All I could do was point to the window, my hands trembling. He followed my gaze, and I watched as his expression shifted from confusion to horror. "What the hell?" And in that moment, I knew. Whatever had been watching me was still out there, hidden in the shadows, waiting for night to fall again. Story 2, Hunted in the Dark. The crisp autumn air clung to my lungs as I settled into my rhythm on the familiar trail, each footfall a reassuring thud against the vibrant carpet of fallen leaves. The forest was alive, a cacophony of rustling branches and distant bird calls that enveloped me like an old friend. I had run this path countless times, drawn to the solitude it offered. But today, an unease settled over me, an itch at the back of my mind that I couldn't quite shake. It began as a fleeting notion, the kind that could easily be dismissed. I had just rounded a bend when I caught a glimpse of a figure in the distance, partially obscured by the thickening foliage. He stood still, a dark silhouette against the patchwork of oranges and browns. I assumed he was another runner, perhaps stopping to stretch or take a call. I offered a brief nod of acknowledgement, but as I continued, I felt his gaze linger, an unsettling weight pressing down on my back. I quickened my pace, my breath coming heavier. The sound of my sneakers crunching through leaves seemed to echo louder in my ears. With each stride, I felt the urge to glance behind me, but I forced myself to focus ahead. The trail narrowed, flanked by towering trees that stretched their gnarled branches overhead, their shadows dancing in the fading light. I welcomed the chill that creeped into the air, hoping it would chase away the feeling of being watched. But as I pushed forward, the sensation grew more palpable. I risked a glance back, and my heart sank. The man had shifted closer, his figure now hovering at the edge of my peripheral vision, his movements deliberate. He wasn't running, he was walking, deliberately tracking me. Panic clawed at my throat, and I quickened my pace again, willing my legs to move faster. The trail twisted and turned beneath a canopy that grew denser, swallowing up the golden light of the afternoon sun. My thoughts spiraled as fear consumed me. Was he following me? Or was it just my imagination? I had always prided myself on my strength and independence, but the growing dread made me feel small and exposed. I spotted a fork in the trail ahead. One path wound deeper into the woods, overgrown and less maintained. The other veered back toward more populated areas. Common sense urged me to take the familiar route, but I felt the man's presence like a shadow creeping closer. I veered off into the wild, hoping to lose him in the labyrinth of trees. Branches whipped against my arms as I plunged into the underbrush, the thorns snagging at my clothes. I pushed through, adrenaline surging, but the rustling behind me grew louder. I could hear the crunch of leaves underfoot, matching my own rhythm. Was he gaining on me? The trail faded and twisted, each step becoming a gamble. I could hear my heartbeat thundering in my ears, drowning out the sounds of the forest. I urged my legs to move faster, fighting against the rising tide of panic. With every glance over my shoulder, the distance between us seemed to shrink. My breaths came in sharp gasps, but I couldn't afford to slow down. The trees began to close in, forming a claustrophobic barrier I could feel tightening around me. I stumbled over roots and rocks, forcing myself to keep my head up despite the growing fear. I thought of the cell phone in my pocket, but it felt useless given the remote location. There were no other runners here, no friendly faces around to help me. Just me and him. I reached a small clearing, a breath of open space that felt like both a sanctuary and a trap. I paused for a moment, hands on my knees, trying to gather my thoughts and control my breathing. The clearing was eerily quiet, the anticipation of something lurking just beyond the trees pressing down on me. Then, I heard it. A soft rustle, too deliberate to be the wind. Panic surged, and I bolted again, heart racing as I crossed the clearing and plunged back into the woods. The path became a blur, each step a desperate bid for freedom. I thought of all the times I had relished the solitude of these trails, how I had come here to escape. Now, I longed for the safety of the trails I had always avoided, the laughter and chatter of fellow runners. I took a sharp turn, hoping to throw him off, and pressed on, fueled by fear. My breath came in ragged gasps, but I couldn't stop. I felt a sharp pain in my side, but I ignored it, willing my body to keep moving. The forest seemed to close in tighter, the shadows deepening as the sun began its descent, casting elongated silhouettes that danced between the trees. The realization struck me that I was losing my bearings. The trail had become a twisted maze, and each step felt increasingly futile. I could hear him now, the sound of footsteps echoing behind me, steady and unyielding. He was still there, still following, a predator on my heels. Then, I stumbled, my foot catching on a hidden root. I fell hard against the ground, the impact jarring through my bones. Pain shot through my ankle, but as I tried to get back up, I heard the soft crunch of leaves just behind me. I froze, heart pounding in my chest, breath caught in my throat. I could feel the weight of his gaze, like a noose tightening around my throat. I was alone, utterly alone, in a secluded part of the forest. The only thing that existed was that menacing presence, growing ever closer. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced among the trees as I pushed through the dense underbrush. My heart raced, but it wasn't just from the exertion. A stirring unease crept into my bones like the chill of an autumn night. I had dismissed the feeling as paranoia, a remnant of my overactive imagination, but each time I glanced back, the presence of that man lingered in my mind like a haunting melody I couldn't shake. When I first spotted him, he was just another figure in the distance, a shadow moving along the trail. I had brushed off my instinct to feel threatened, blaming it on my own insecurities. It was a secluded path, known for its beauty, but unfamiliar to me, perfect for a late afternoon run. I relied on the rhythm of my breath and the sound of my feet against the earthy trail to drown out the doubts. Yet, as I pushed past another bend, I risked another look back. He was still there, unfaltering but far enough away to be merely an apparition of discomfort. Something about the way he moved sent shivers down my spine. His pace was steady, deliberate, as if he were waiting for something not just to catch up, but to savor the chase. I forced myself to focus on the trail ahead, my legs pumping beneath me, the sound of my breath loud in my ears. The trees closed in around me, their gnarled branches twisting like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. I had entered a part of the forest that felt even more isolated. The path was narrowing, the underbrush thickening. It was a whispering labyrinth of shadows and dappled sunlight, and as the distance between us shrank, a visceral panic clawed at my chest. I picked up my pace, pushing myself, but it only amplified the sound of my pounding heart. Another glance. He was closer now, his face obscured by the foliage, but I could make out the dark outline of his figure. My instinct screamed for me to run harder, to surge forward, but the dread settled like a weight in my stomach. What if I stumbled? What if I fell? My mind raced with a torrent of worst-case scenarios. I turned off the trail into a less defined path that branched into the woods, hoping to throw him off my scent. The dry leaves crunched beneath my sneakers, each crackle echoing the encroaching silence. I knew I was entering uncharted territory, and with it came the realization I might be losing my grip on reason. Each hurried breath filled my lungs with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and I cursed myself for running this way alone. With every step, I felt the breath of the forest around me, its ancient trees closing in like sentinels. I tried to concentrate on my breathing, steadying my frantic pulse, but the sensation of being watched loomed, each rustle in the underbrush freezing me in place. I paused, forcing myself to listen. The world fell silent. No birds sang, and the usual forest sounds vanished, as if the woods held their breath in anticipation. I moved again, taking long strides deeper into the detritus of leaves and branches. An instinct whispered in the back of my mind, "Don't let him catch you." But I couldn't tell where I was going. The trees became faceless, unfamiliar, and I found myself in a dense thicket that seemed to swallow the light. Then, I heard a snap of a twig behind me. I froze and turned slowly. The air thickened around me, and I held my breath, straining to hear over the thudding of my heart. Another crack, and I knew he was closer. The man had followed me into the depths of the forest, and the realization sent a wave of icy terror through me. I felt the desperate urge to scream, but nothing escaped my lips. I stumbled back onto the main trail, panting as I scanned my surroundings frantically. There was no one in sight. No other runners, no cyclists, only the oppressive stillness of the trees. I cursed under my breath, my mind racing with panic. Why hadn't I brought my phone? The thought twisted like a knife in my gut. Suddenly, I caught a glimpse of him again, a dark figure emerging from between the trees. My pulse surged. I bolted, abandoning the trail without a second thought. I crashed through the underbrush, heart hammering in my chest as I darted in any direction that felt away from him. Branches clawed at my arms, but pain was a distant thought when survival reigned. The trail thinned again, and I leapt over a fallen log, adrenaline guiding my every movement. I could hear footsteps behind me now, heavy and deliberate. I felt the panic clawing at my throat, but I pushed myself harder. I was losing ground, but I refused to let him catch me. I didn't know what awaited me if he did. Another glance over my shoulder, his face was clearer now, twisted in a cruel semblance of a smile, eyes glinting with a predatory hunger. I stumbled on the uneven ground, terror lending me strength as I regained my footing. I was running blind, but it didn't matter. All that mattered was the desperate need to escape. The trees began to thin ahead, and I could see a glimmer of light breaking through the canopy. My instincts urged me to keep going, to reach whatever safety lay beyond the trees. I burst through the last clump of foliage and skidded to a halt at the edge of a small clearing. My breath came in ragged gasps as I scanned the area, searching for help. My heart sank as I realized it was empty, the open space filled with only the echoes of my own fear. I turned back toward the forest, panting, my body coiled with tension. I had lost him, for now. But the feeling of being hunted lingered, a shadow in my mind that promised this wasn't over. I needed to regroup. I needed a plan. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows through the trees and giving the forest an eerie, sepulchral glow. The crunch of gravel underfoot was a comforting rhythm, one I had grown accustomed to during my countless runs on this winding trail. But today, the rhythm felt off. There was an unsettling tension in the air, a taut line pulling my senses tight. It started at the edge of my vision, a figure I had first noticed minutes ago. A man, just far enough behind me to blend into the trees, but close enough that his presence made my heart race faster than the run itself. I told myself he was just another runner, perhaps a local who had chosen the same time of day for his exercise. Still, the way he moved, steady, deliberate, set off alarm bells in my mind. I had been running this trail for years, always alone, and I was acutely aware of its secluded nature. The deeper I ventured, the more the trees closed in, swallowing the sunlight and isolating me from the outside world. I pushed myself harder, my breath coming in sharp gasps. The sweat trickled down my back as I fought against the urge to look over my shoulder. Each time I glanced toward the edges of the path, I caught a glimpse of him, a flash of a dark shirt, a hint of movement that sent a jolt of panic coursing through me. I quickened my pace, the rhythm of my feet pounding louder in my ears, drowning out the rustling leaves and chirping birds. And yet, he kept matching me stride for stride. The path twisted sharply, leading me deeper into the woods, the trees enveloping me in a suffocating embrace. I forced my mind to remain focused, to push thoughts of what might happen aside. I had always felt invincible during my runs, like the forest was my sanctuary. Today, it felt like a prison. I rounded a bend and nearly stumbled over a root, catching myself just in time. My heart raced, not from the exertion, but from the realization that I was losing control. The man's footsteps echoed in my ears, but when I dared to look back, there was no sign of him. Just the trees, standing silent as sentinels, as if they were conspiring to keep me trapped. Just keep running, I whispered to myself, a mantra to ward off the creeping dread. I wanted to believe that I could outpace him, but the feeling of being hunted gnawed at my insides. I reached a clearing where the trees parted, allowing a breath of fresh air to fill my lungs. I stood there for a moment, letting the calm wash over me, regaining my composure. There was nothing behind me, just empty trail and the rustling of leaves. Maybe I had overreacted, maybe he had turned off somewhere. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the forest's earthy scent, and began to move again. But then, the hairs on the back of my neck prickled as I heard a snap of a twig unmistakably close. I froze, my heart thundering in my chest, and turned slowly, scanning the edges of the clearing for any sign of movement. Nothing. Just shadows, deepening as the sun dipped lower in the sky. I needed to get out of there, to make my way back before darkness descended. I retraced my steps, but the sound of my own footsteps felt muffled, like a ghost was trailing behind, echoing my every move. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see him standing there, watching. But there was nothing, just the quiet of the forest and the dread coiling tighter around me. As I pushed down the path, I noticed more of the unsettling signs, broken branches, fresh footprints in the damp earth, much larger than mine and leading off the trail. Panic surged through me. I had never seen this before. Whoever had left those prints wasn't just another runner, they were something else entirely. Adrenaline surged as I quickened my pace once more, convincing myself that I was imagining things. But the deeper I went, the more I felt the forest closing in, as if it were alive, reshaping itself around me to keep me inside. The trail narrowed, and the trees grew denser, their trunks more gnarled. I stumbled into a small clearing, my breath coming in shallow bursts. I needed to think. I glanced around, searching for an escape route. I could take the trail back, but it felt like retreating into the lion's den. As if sensing my fear, the sounds of the forest grew louder, a chorus of rustling leaves, snapping twigs, and something else, something altogether sinister. In the distance, I caught sight of a figure lurking between the trees. My breath hitched in my throat. It was the man. He stood still, as if waiting for me to notice him. I locked eyes with him, and a shiver ran down my spine. There was something wrong in the way he smiled, an unsettling contortion that twisted his face into something monstrous. I turned and bolted, my legs propelling me forward with a primal instinct to flee. Twigs snapped underfoot, branches whipped at my skin, but I didn't care. The pounding of my heart drowned out everything else until it was just me and the sound of my breath, harsh and desperate. I dashed back toward the trail, sprinting harder than I ever had before. I felt the darkness creeping, felt it wrapping around me as the last rays of sun slipped away. There was no time to waste. I didn't dare look back, but I could feel him behind me, close enough to smell the sweat and earth, close enough to reach out. Each labored breath pulled me farther from safety, each ounce of dread pushing me into a deeper abyss. The forest had turned into a predator, and I was its prey. I needed to find a way out before I became just another echo in its depths. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows that twisted and stretched through the trees. I could hear my breath quickening, the sound of my feet pounding on the dirt trail echoing in my ears, but I refused to let it consume me. Not now. Now I could feel him back there, just out of sight, lurking like a specter among the trees. I had first noticed him about a mile back, a flicker of movement among the thicket. At first, I dismissed it as a trick of the light or my imagination running wild, but as I pressed forward, I glanced over my shoulder and saw him again, tall, lean, with dark hair that seemed to blend into the shadows. He had been maintaining a steady distance, just enough to keep me uneasy without revealing his intentions. I accelerated, digging my heels into the earth, heart pounding not just from exertion but from an insidious fear that coiled in my gut. Run. That was what my mind screamed. Just run. I had trained for this, but never had I encountered anyone like this before. The trails I frequented were usually deserted, a sanctuary from the chaos of life. Today, however, they felt like a trap. With every stride, the sound of my breath seemed to grow louder, a frantic rhythm that contradicted the stillness around me. The trees loomed closer, branches knitting overhead like skeletal fingers threatening to ensnare me. I risked another look and saw him, a shadow in the distance, still following. The panic surged within me, urging me to push harder, faster. I turned a sharp corner, a narrow bend that led deeper into the woods, where the trail narrowed and the foliage thickened. I had known this area was less traversed, often left to the whims of nature. A part of me had cherished the solitude, but now it felt like a descent into isolation. If I screamed, would anyone hear me? The thought clouded my mind as I momentarily lost my footing and stumbled, my ankle twisting painfully. Gritting my teeth against the pain, I pressed on, each step a reminder of how vulnerable I was. The man was still there, his form barely visible through the trees, but I could feel his eyes on me. I could not shake the sensation that he was toying with me, his calm pursuit a cruel game meant to unnerve. I focused on the path ahead, trying to drown out the anxiety spiraling inside. A part of me was tempted to confront him, to demand why he was following me, but I had learned enough about the world to know that confronting strangers in the woods rarely ended well. I took a sharp right onto a less familiar trail, hoping to lose him. The underbrush crackled underfoot, and the air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. My heart raced, not just from the run but from the overwhelming urge to escape. Every rustle in the undergrowth made me jump, every snap of a twig a reminder that I was alone. I stumbled again, this time scraping my palms against the rough bark of a nearby tree as I caught myself. He was no longer behind me. My heart fluttered with a mix of relief and confusion. Had I finally lost him? I glanced back, scanning the dimming path behind me, anxiety gripping my chest again when I saw nothing but the swaying branches. The forest seemed to sigh, as if taking a breath of its own, and I felt the chill of the encroaching evening wrap around me. I took a moment to steady my breathing, to calm the rise of dread that threatened to overwhelm me. Perhaps I had been too hasty, too paranoid. I could turn around, retrace my steps to the main trail. I was still a few miles from the trailhead, but I could make it back before it got dark. That thought carried me forward. I glanced at my watch. It was nearly 6, and the sun was sinking fast. I could feel the weight of twilight settling around me, and as I turned to start back, an unsettling sensation washed over me. There was no sound, no birds, no rustle of small animals in the underbrush. Just silence, heavy and oppressive. I stepped back onto the main trail, the familiar dirt path offering a moment of comfort. But that comfort shattered when a voice called out from behind me. "Hey, wait up." It wasn't the deep tone I had feared, nor the haunting presence of the man I had seen earlier. It was an unfamiliar voice, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My gut twisted tighter. I could feel the tension in my limbs as I picked up my pace again, the panic escalating. "Are you okay? You look lost." The voice was closer now, and I tore my eyes away from the path just long enough to see a figure stepping into view through the trees, a man, tall and lean, with dark hair. Just like the one I had seen earlier. My heart sunk. I bolted. My lungs burned as I pushed myself harder, adrenaline flooding my veins. I didn't dare look behind me, but I could hear his footsteps crunching through the underbrush, relentless, pursuing. This was no longer a mere game, it felt like a hunt. The trees blurred around me, branches whipped against my skin, and the twilight darkened, swallowing any hope of safety. I was alone in this nightmare, a solitary figure running, hunted by something I couldn't understand. I had to find a way out, but the forest had become a labyrinth, a trap with no escape. I forced myself to focus on the trail, feeling the ground shift beneath my feet, wondering just how far I could run before the darkness enveloped me completely. The panic clawed at me, but I knew that if I let it take over, if I succumbed to the fear, I would be lost forever. The afternoon sun had dipped behind the trees, casting elongated shadows that danced across the trail as I ran. My breath came in steady puffs, and the rhythmic thud of my shoes against the dirt felt grounding, reassuring. But something shifted in my gut, an unease that hadn't been there moments earlier. It was a feeling I couldn't shake, a gnawing awareness that I was no longer alone. Glancing over my shoulder, I saw him. The man had appeared as if conjured from the forest itself, a dark figure hovering at the edge of my periphery. He moved with purpose, his gait steady, his eyes locked on my back. My heart raced, pounding against my ribs as I quickened my pace. At first, I had thought it was just my imagination. I had been running early that morning in a well-trodden area, surrounded by familiar faces and the sounds of life, laughter, chatter, the barking of dogs. But as I ventured deeper into the woods, those sounds faded, replaced by the unsettling symphony of rustling leaves and distant bird calls. Now the solitude felt suffocating. I pushed myself harder, urging my legs to move faster, faster. With each step, I felt the weight of his presence pressing against my back. A glance down the trail confirmed my fears. He hadn't lost sight of me. His silhouette remained, a dark shadow trailing me like a lingering nightmare. The path narrowed, bordered by thick underbrush that seemed to close in around me. Panic surged, and I weighed my options. The idea of turning back was tempting, but I could already hear my pounding heart drowning out every rational thought. Just keep running. If I stopped, I might not start again. I took another quick glance over my shoulder. The man appeared closer now, his figure more defined, and that unsettling feeling deepened. There were no other runners, no hikers. Just me and him. The isolated stretch of forest swallowed any sound of life. I felt the first tremors of fear creeping in, coiling like a serpent around my chest. When I rounded a bend in the trail, the trees grew denser, and the path forked into 3 different directions. A desperate instinct urged me to veer left. It felt wrong but also exhilarating, as if I was plunging deeper into some hidden world. I could hear the faint crunch of leaves behind me, a reminder that he was still there. The terrain shifted beneath my feet, roots jutting out like fingers grasping for my ankles. I stumbled slightly, regaining my balance just in time to look back again. He was still there, closer. I could make out more of his features now. His clothes were nondescript, a faded gray t-shirt and dark shorts, but his expression was obscured by the shadow of the trees. Each time I glanced back, he seemed to have closed the gap, his pace unwavering. I pushed myself harder, fueling my movements with adrenaline, but that only seemed to feed my paranoia. Every sound in the forest became amplified, the rustle of the wind, the snap of a twig, my own heavy breaths echoing like a drum. The feeling of being prey gnawed at me, urging my legs to run faster, yet I felt the weight of exhaustion creeping in. How much longer could I maintain this pace? As I neared another curve, the dense foliage enveloped me tighter. I could almost feel the air grow damp, the scent of earth mingling with something less pleasant. I pressed on, hoping to find a break in the trees, a glimpse of civilization, but the oppressive silence only thickened around me. No signs of life, no escape. In a moment of desperation, I ducked behind a large tree, my heart pounding a frantic beat in my chest. I held my breath, hoping against hope that he would pass by without noticing me. Time stretched, drawing out the seconds into what felt like an eternity. Through the gaps in the leaves, I caught glimpses of him as he jogged past, his attention still locked on the path. My heart sank. I had only delayed the inevitable. He would turn around. He would find me. My mind raced through thoughts of self-defense, imagining how I would fight back should the moment arise. But how? I was just a woman alone in the woods, and he was a stranger with intent. After what felt like long enough for him to have moved far away, I stepped out from my hiding spot, trembling. I had to continue running. I had to find a way out. With every ounce of strength remaining, I forced my legs to move again. The fear drove me forward, blurring the line between fight and flight. As I rounded a bend, a glimmer of hope shimmered between the trees, a break in the woods that might lead to a clearing, a road, a trailhead. I surged toward it, each step a plea for freedom. My lungs burned, but I welcomed the pain over the chilling grip of terror. Then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me, growing louder, closer. The realization struck like a slap. He hadn't given up. The thought sent a wave of cold terror crashing over me, propelling my legs to move even faster. Each breath felt like it might be my last if I didn't escape. The clearing was almost there, but doubt threatened to swallow me whole. What if it was a trap? What if he was waiting for me? But there was no time for such thoughts. I had to reach it. As I burst from the trees into the open, I took a moment to glance over my shoulder. The man was almost on top of me now, his expression more pronounced, and I could see the intensity in his eyes. He wasn't just running anymore, he was hunting. Adrenaline surged through my veins, and with a final push, I sprinted into the clearing, praying for safety, for relief, for anything to signal that help was near. And then, just as quickly, I was swallowed by darkness, the last of the light filtering away as the trees reclined behind me, a suffocating barrier between me and escape. He was still following. I could feel it. The hunt was only beginning. Story 3, Unwelcome Passenger. The sun dipped low behind the horizon as I stepped out of the office building, the air thick with the remnants of a long day. I had stayed late, poring over spreadsheets that felt more like shackles than tasks. As I walked toward the parking lot, my mind replayed the day's monotonies. I was too tired to think, my body moving on autopilot, and that's when I saw it, my car, a dull blue sedan sitting quietly among its peers. Or so I thought. I slid into the driver's seat and absently clicked the lock button on my key fob. It wasn't until I noticed a mint green air freshener dangling from the rearview mirror that a chill prickled my skin. I didn't own any air freshener, let alone one that smelled like something straight out of an old lady's purse. A sense of unease washed over me, but it blended seamlessly with the fatigue that settled over my limbs. Before I could think clearly, the driver's side door swung open. A man stood there, his face contorted into an expression that bounced between disbelief and fury. He was tall, wearing a dark hoodie that shadowed his features, but his eyes were sharp, piercing through the twilight like ice. "What the hell are you doing in my car?" he spat, his voice low but edged with an intensity that made my heart skip. I froze. My brain scrambled for a response. The adrenaline surged, obliterating the day's exhaustion in an instant. I think there's been a mistake," I stammered, forcing a shaky smile, trying to play it cool despite the icy grip of dread tightening around my chest. "Get out," he commanded, eyes narrowing with impatience. There was an undeniable menace behind his words, a tangible threat that made my palms sweat. "No, listen, I thought this was my car. I must have gotten confused." "I'm really sorry," I said, trying to keep my voice steady while I eased my body deeper into the seat. The car felt like a cage now, heat rising in my cheeks as I realized the magnitude of my error. "Confused?" He scoffed, glancing at the back seat as if searching for something. "You really think it's okay to just hop in someone else's car?" My mind raced. I could bolt from the car, but what if he was the type to chase after me? The parking lot was nearly empty, shadows creeping further as the day surrendered to night. "Look, I'll get out. Just give me a second." He stepped closer, looming over me like a storm cloud ready to burst. "You think I'm gonna let you walk away after that? This is my car. Wait. Just wait a minute." The panic in my voice felt foreign. I was a rational man, a numbers guy, but in that moment, I felt anything but rational. "My name is David. I work at the office down the street. I swear I thought this was mine. I promise I'll leave." "Your name?" he scoffed again, leaning closer, and I could see the veins pulsing in his neck. "What's your last name, then?" I hesitated, my throat dry. "It's Taylor. David Taylor." "Bullshit," he growled, his eyes narrowing even further. "You're lying." "I'm not lying." My voice came out louder than intended, a desperate plea. "Look, I'll show you my ID. Just give me a moment. I fumbled in my back pocket, pulling out my wallet with trembling fingers. The man's eyes flickered to the movement, and I sensed a shift in his demeanor. Don't do anything stupid, he warned, his voice low and dangerous. No, I'm just getting my... I stopped, feeling the weight of his gaze. I flipped my wallet open, revealing my ID, but his hand shot out, slamming the car door behind him with a deafening thud. Get out, he seethed, his voice now a tight whisper, almost as if he feared the darkness creeping in. 1,000 thoughts crashed through my mind. Call for help? But who would hear me? There was no one around. The shadows seemed to stretch, wrapping around the edges of the lot like ink spilled on paper. Please, I said, trying to maintain eye contact, hoping to convey sincerity, though I felt anything but. I'm just trying to get home. Home, he echoed, a mocking lilt in his voice. What makes you think you deserve to go home after breaking into my car? Desperation clawed at me. Listen, I'm a good guy. I swear. Just let me out. I was in a rush and got confused. He stepped back, considering me for a moment that felt like an eternity. You're not going to cause any more trouble, are you? No, I swear. I just want to leave. No, he shouted, voice echoing off nearby buildings, drawing unwelcome attention. You stay put. You think you can just walk away from this? The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I could feel my heart pounding, could hear it drumming in my ears. I needed a way out, and fast. Look, I'll make it worth your while. I blurted, scrambling to think of something, anything that might appease him. I can give you cash. Just let me out. He paused, his expression momentarily morphing from fury to curiosity. I could see the wheels in his mind turning, the idea of easy money sparking some interest. But the moment passed, and the anger returned, sharper than before. You think this is a game? The cold air rushed in as he opened the door again, and panic gripped me. I had to think quick. Wait. I know it looks bad, but I can help you with something. I can make sure this. I gestured wildly to the car, unsure how to finish the thought. You need to let me go. Just give me a chance to explain. For a split second, I thought he might listen. I had to cling to that sliver of hope, for in his eyes, I saw something deeper, something that hinted at desperation of his own. But would it be enough to keep me alive? I had always considered myself a cautious person. I checked my surroundings before I entered a room, noted license plates before I left a parking lot, and never took the same path home from work twice in a week. Yet, that evening, with the rain thrumming against the pavement and twilight creeping in, I stumbled into a situation I never anticipated. After the long, grueling day at the office, complete with meetings that felt like they would never end, I found myself moving through the parking garage in a haze. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting odd shadows on the concrete walls as I approached my car. The routine was familiar, a quick glance at my phone to check for missed calls, a sigh of relief that I was finally off the clock, and then the jangle of keys as I approached what I thought was my vehicle. I yanked open the driver's side door, and a wave of exhaustion washed over me. The interior was dark, the air laden with that new car smell, mingled with a hint of something more musky. I slid into the seat, letting the door click shut behind me. It was only when I glanced down that unease crawled up my spine. The interior was wrong, different colors, a different layout. Confusion clouded my mind. I was sure this was my car. Before I could process this realization, the sound of a sharp knock on the passenger window erupted in the silence. I jumped, my heart faltering in my chest. A man stood there, drenched from the rain, his face obscured by the shadows of dusk. His eyes locked onto mine, piercing and furious. "Hey," "What the hell are you doing?" he shouted, his voice like gravel. Panic twisted in my stomach as my mind raced. I had no idea how this had happened, but instinctively, I shifted into reverse, ready to flee. But he was quick, rushing around to my side and yanking the door open before I had a chance to react. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded, leaning in, his breath hot against my face. I'm sorry. I thought this was my car," I stammered, my voice trembling. My heart drummed in my ears, drowning out the rain's relentless patter. "This is my car. Get out." His words were laced with menace, and I could see the muscles in his jaw tightening. I knew that leaving was the only rational choice, but I was frozen, trapped behind the steering wheel. With every heartbeat, fear wrapped around me tighter. My mind raced for a way to defuse the situation, to craft a story that would not provoke him further. I'm really sorry. I just got so mixed up. It's been a long day, you know?" I forced a shaky laugh, trying to humanize myself, to make him see me as anything but a threat. I must have walked right past my car. Would you believe I parked on the other side? His features softened just a fraction, but I could see the suspicion still clung to him. "You don't even know what your own car looks like?" "I do." It's just, my voice cracked as I gestured helplessly toward the other end of the garage. "It's dark, and everything looks the same in here. I just..." "Stop talking," he barked, cutting me off. The authority in his voice sent shivers down my spine, and all I could do was nod, willing myself to remain calm. "Can we just figure this out? I'll show you my keys. My car is..." "Your keys?" he scoffed, and I could see the anger swelling in his eyes again. "You think I'm just going to stand here and let you waste my time?" I took a deep breath, searching for the right words. "Look, I work down the street. Maybe we can check the parking pass or something?" I reached for my wallet, feeling like a marionette whose strings were suddenly cut as my hands trembled. He hesitated, his brow furrowing. The tension hung thick between us, the air dense with unspoken threats. Finally, he stepped back slightly, giving me the space to breathe. "Show me," he said, though the edge in his voice remained sharp. I fumbled with my wallet, my hand shaking as I pulled out my ID. The photo was a tired reflection of the man I was supposed to be, a man who owned a car, who belonged somewhere. "See? This is me. I work at the agency down on 5th. He leaned closer to inspect the card, his anger morphing into confusion, though I still felt the danger simmering beneath the surface. "And your car?" "It's a silver Honda Civic," I replied, my voice steadying slightly, the lie rolling off my tongue with practiced ease. "It should have the same parking pass as I showed you on my ID." The stranger's expression shifted. The storm clouds in his eyes began to dissipate just a bit as he considered my plea. "Fine," he said finally, his voice lowering just enough for me to sense the threat receding. "But if you're lying..." I nodded vigorously, my heart pounding in my chest, the last vestiges of adrenaline making my hands slick against the steering wheel. "I promise, I'm not. Just give me a moment, please." That moment felt like an eternity, every second dripping with uncertainty as I prayed I hadn't just signed my death warrant. If he discovered the truth, that I had no intention of ever getting out of this car alive, what would happen next? As he contemplated his next move, I felt hope cautiously creeping into my chest, a fragile ember that dared to ignite. If I could just get through this tense encounter, maybe, just maybe, I could find my way back to safety. But for now, the darkness loomed heavier than before, and I was still stuck in a stranger's car, praying for deliverance in the dim light of a swirling storm. I had been staring at the office building for far too long, the fluorescent lights flickering like the last gasps of a dying star. The day had dragged on, a melange of deadlines and coffee stains, leaving me bone-tired and vulnerable. My mind seemed to float as I approached the parking lot, the weight of the day's fatigue pulling me deeper into a fog that clouded my senses. Each step felt heavier, each breath a labor. The wind whispered through the empty lot, rustling paper scraps and remnants of an abandoned coffee cup. I spotted my car, my old, beaten-down sedan, its faded paint blending into the shadows like a ghost haunting its old haunts. But even in my disoriented state, I noticed something was off. The car was parked a few slots over from where I usually left it, but I brushed aside the nagging feeling, fatigue numbing my instincts. As I approached, I fumbled with my keys, the weight of them heavy in my pocket. I slid into the driver's seat, the familiar smell of worn upholstery wrapping around me like a comforting embrace. It wasn't until I fully settled in that I realized something was wrong. The interior was different. The seat adjusted too far forward, the steering wheel felt foreign, and an unfamiliar air freshener clung to the fabric. My heart raced as clarity cut through the fog. This was not my car. Panic surged through me, and I reached for the door, but before I could turn the handle, the passenger side door swung open. A man stood there, his face twisted with rage, his eyes dark and piercing. He glared at me as if I were a thief caught red-handed. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he spat, his tone laced with venom. I stumbled to find my voice. I am sorry. I thought this was my car. I must have gotten confused." The man shook his head, hands balled into fists, his knuckles pale against the waning light. "This is my car. Get out." Every instinct screamed at me to bolt, but the weight of his gaze pinned me to the seat. "Look, I didn't mean any harm. I just..." "Get out," he shouted, his voice echoing off the walls of the parking structure. I could feel eyes on us, curious glances from a few distant figures, but it felt like they were only shadows, hovering in the background of our escalating confrontation. I racked my brain for a story, for a way to defuse the situation that wouldn't leave me bleeding on the asphalt. "I'm just trying to make it to my appointment, okay? I must have mistaken it for my twin. You know, a lot of cars look alike." My voice trembled, and the lie felt flimsy, a paper bridge over a chasm of fear. The man's expression shifted slightly, but anger still simmered beneath the surface. "You think I'm gonna fall for that? I've seen a lot of scams, buddy, and I'm not letting you get away with it." He stepped closer, filling the space, the scent of sweat and cheap cologne invading the confined air. I wanted to shrink back, to make myself smaller, but I was frozen in place. My heart pounded incessantly, each beat echoing my growing dread. "Please, I'm telling you, I made a mistake," I urged. "It's been a long day, and I only wanted to get home. I'm not a criminal. Quit the sob story. Just get out before I make you." He leaned in, his face a mask of fury, and I caught a glimpse of something sharp glinting in his pocket. Desperation clawed at my throat as I searched for an escape. "Look, I'll call the cops. We can sort this out. I have the number of my real car, my license plate." He interrupted, laughter devoid of any real humor. "You think I'm afraid of the cops? You think they believe you over me?" The shadows around us seemed to stretch, closing me in, the weight of his presence pressing against my chest. "Look," I said, each word a struggle, "I'm just a guy trying to get home. Just give me a chance to prove it." His eyes narrowed, assessing, weighing my desperation. "I don't have time for games," he growled. "I have places to be. I'm just as late." I countered, my voice rising higher than I intended, desperation fueling my words. "Let's call someone. You can talk to my boss, or I can show you my ID." "Shut up." His voice erupted like a thunderclap, and I recoiled as he stepped back, deliberating his next move. My mind raced, searching for any thread I could grasp to pull myself from this nightmare. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to appear calmer, summoning a glimmer of resolve. What if we just talk for a moment? Instead of escalating this? Something flickered in his eyes, a brief flicker of uncertainty, and I seized on it. Maybe we can figure this out together. I swear I didn't mean to intrude. The flicker grew, and for a split second, I thought I saw doubt wash over his features. Perhaps he was human after all. I'm just trying to get home. I can get my phone, show you my messages. Enough. He bent down, so close I could see the veins in his temple pulsing. You have one more chance. Get out of my car, or you're going to regret it. The harsh truth of his words sunk into my gut like ice. My instinct screamed to run, but it was clear that it wouldn't work. He was ready to escalate, and I needed to be clever. Okay, I whispered, my voice trembling, I'll get out. Just let me get my things. I reached for the door handle, but as I pulled it open, adrenaline surged, and I felt a rush of hope. Maybe I could slip past him, take my chances in the open parking structure. My heart pounded as I swung my legs out, but he lunged forward, grabbing my arm. Not so fast, he growled, dragging me back toward the depths of the car. I struggled against his grip, my mind racing faster than my breath. I couldn't afford to be trapped. Not now. Not ever. The night air was thick with the musty odor of rain-soaked asphalt as I stumbled out of the office building, my mind still buzzing with the day's chaotic meetings and unyielding deadlines. I rubbed my temples, hoping to dispel the lingering tension, and stepped into the dimly lit parking lot, each fluorescent light casting a sickly yellow hue over the rows of cars. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a reminder of an unread message. I decided to ignore it. I didn't have the energy. As I approached what I thought was my car, a charcoal gray sedan, the weight of fatigue pressed against my chest. I fumbled for my keys, my fingers trembling slightly as I shoved them into the lock. The familiar click reverberated in my ears, and I slid into the passenger seat, sighing as I sank into the worn leather. Wrong car, buddy. The voice, deep and gravelly, sent chills racing down my spine. I turned to see a man staring at me, his eyes narrowed and furious, framed by the shadows of the parking lot. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, with unkempt hair and a 5 o'clock shadow that painted his jaw in shadows. Panic surged through me, sharp and electric. I swallowed hard, my mind racing to formulate a response while my heart thumped violently against my rib cage. I'm sorry. I thought this was mine. My voice wavered, betraying the calm I desperately tried to project. The man remained rigid, his arms crossed, a silhouette of raw anger. He leaned closer, his breath a harsh whisper in the confined space. You better get out before I make this ugly. The words coursed through me like ice water. I glanced at the passenger door, weighing my options. If I bolted, would he chase me? Would he really hurt me? I kept my palms sweating against the leather seat, forcing myself to remain calm. Look, I'm really sorry. I'm just tired. It's been a long day, I pleaded, trying to sound remorseful instead of terrified. He leaned even closer, and I could see the glint of something metallic in his hand. A keychain? No, it looked more menacing. A blade? Panic twisted my stomach into knots. My voice dropped to a whisper. I'll get out. Just let me go. His demeanor softened slightly, but the fire in his eyes remained. You think you can just waltz in here, mess with my stuff, and walk away like nothing happened? He leaned back, fists relaxing at his sides but still dangerously close to his waistband. I could see the faint bulge of a weapon tucked beneath his shirt. I took a deep breath, gathering the courage to engage him further. I didn't mean to trespass, I stammered, hoping desperation might coax him away from violence. I drive a similar car. It's been a long week. My head's all foggy, just trying to get home. Home? He echoed, his voice laced with suspicion. He shifted, making me acutely aware of the confined space around us. What's your address? My heart dropped. If I gave him my real address, he'd know I was lying if he ever found out that I was not who I claimed to be. I hesitated, my mind a frantic whirlwind. An address popped into my head, a friend's place, close enough to mine that it wouldn't raise too much suspicion. Ah, it's over by Maple and Fifth. Just a few blocks away. For a moment, he scrutinized me, his expression unreadable, like a predator weighing its prey. I could see his resolve fading slightly, and I seized the opportunity. I'm really sorry. Please believe me. I didn't mean any harm. Didn't mean any harm? The man scoffed, his eyes hardening again. How do I know you're not trying to steal my car? I don't even know who you are. I'm just a guy, I said, my urgency rising. I swear to you, I'm not like that. I have a family, a job. You have no reason to believe me, but I'm not dangerous. You can check my wallet. I pulled it from my pocket, hoping the act of compliance would quell his rage. Keep it where it is. His voice cut through the tension, and I froze, holding my breath as he considered my offer. How do I know what you're saying is true? Desperation clawed at my throat. You know how it is. Mistakes happen. Just let me go, and I promise I won't say a word. This will be our secret. He studied me, the rage simmering beneath the surface of his skin, and in that moment, I could see a flicker of indecision. The rain started falling lightly, tapping against the windshield like a nervous heartbeat. It seeped into the silence, amplifying the tension in the car. All right, he finally said, his voice low. Here's the deal. You tell me something I can believe. Something real, and maybe I let you go, but you need to be honest. I nodded, my pulse racing as I grappled with the weight of the moment. I live alone. I'm just trying to figure things out. Lost my dad last year. Been hard ever since. The words spilled out before I could stop myself, the raw edge of truth mingling with my fear. I'm just trying to get by. He hesitated, a brief flicker of sympathy lighting his eyes. Why didn't you just say that in the first place? A sense of relief washed over me, but I knew better than to let my guard down. I took a deep breath. I didn't think you'd care. Try me, he replied, and for the first time, I sensed his anger was dimming. I pressed on, even as the storm outside raged harder, punctuating my desperation. I'm just looking for a way out of this mess. I didn't want to become another statistic. I looked directly into his eyes, willing him to see the sincerity pushing through my walls of fear. I'll let you go, he said, finally. But you have to promise me one thing. You'll own your mistakes. Absolutely, I breathed, relief flooding my veins. He studied me for one last moment, then nodded, his tension easing. Get out, and don't make me regret this. I could hardly believe my luck. As I slid out of the car, I made my way into the rain, soaked in gratitude for the chance he'd given me. The weight of my near escape settled in my gut, and I vowed to never take another wrong step again. I had hoped that leaving work late would mean I could slip anonymously into my car and slip away from the day's tension. Yet as I approached the row of vehicles, the shadows of the parking lot seemed to grow thicker, enveloping me in a shroud of unease. My car, a battered sedan, was parked in its usual spot, but in my exhausted stupor, I mistook another vehicle for mine. A sleek, black coupe with tinted windows drew me in like a siren's call, and I climbed inside without a second thought. The plush leather felt foreign beneath me, almost too pristine, too rich. It was not until I reached for the ignition that I noticed the small, telltale key fob, a bright red S embossed on the side. Panic tightened my throat as I realized the mistake I had made, and I barely registered the sound of the door swinging open. The stranger approached, silhouetted against the dying light. "What the hell are you doing?" he growled, stepping into the light as I froze. He was tall, with a wild mane of hair and eyes that burned like hot coals, fixated on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I stammered. I thought this was my car." My voice cracked, and I swallowed hard, trying to suppress the tide of fear that threatened to overwhelm me. He stepped closer, his hands jammed into the pockets of his leather jacket, and I saw the glint of something metallic tucked at his hip. "It's not your car. Get out." I fumbled for the door handle, but dread rooted me in place. "Look, I'm really sorry," I managed, forcing my voice steady. "I had a long day. A long day? So you thought you'd just take a joyride in someone else's car?" His voice dripped with iron, and I could feel his breath, laced with stale cigarettes and anger, washing over me. "I know. I thought it was mine. I swear. I just need to get home. Please." My mind raced, searching for a way out. I needed to buy time to defuse his fury before it ignited into something more dangerous. He leaned in closer, his eyes narrowing. "You think I'm going to let you just walk away after that? You could have stolen it. Do you think I'm some kind of idiot?" I could feel the weight of his gaze, the silence between us thickening, pressing against my chest. "I'm not a thief," I insisted, the sincerity in my voice almost surprising me. "I swear, I didn't do it on purpose. Just let me explain." "Explain what?" "How you plan on ruining my night." He stepped back, considering me with a cold grin that sent a shiver racing down my spine. Suddenly brainstorming, I grabbed onto a thread of half-truth. "I get it. You must be in a rush. My wife is sick, and I've been trying to get home." The words fell from my mouth like desperate seeds, hoping they would take root in his empathy. His expression flickered just for a moment. "Your wife?" "Yes. I hesitated, forcing out the rest of the lie. "She's waiting for me. I just need to get home. I'll leave right now. Please." I moved to open the door, but he caught my wrist, his grip ironclad. "Don't move," he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "You think I'm going to let you just walk away? What do I look like, a fool?" I could feel sweat beading on the back of my neck. "No, please. I promise I'll leave." "I'm sorry." "Where do you live?" he challenged, his grip tightening. I hesitated, knowing I couldn't afford to give him my actual address. "Just a few blocks over," I replied, trying to sound casual. "I work at the bank downtown." The tension hung in the air like a heavy fog, and for a moment, the anger in his eyes flickered again, replaced by suspicion. "The bank?" "Yes," I said, forcing a nod. "It was a tough day, you know. They want me to work late. Shut up," he snapped, cutting me off. "Just shut up and listen. You stepped into the wrong car. Now, you need to figure out how to unfuck this situation." "I will," I assured him. "I'll just leave, I promise." He released my wrist slightly, still looming with an unruly energy that suggested violence simmered just below the surface. "You think I'm just going to trust you?" "No, I don't. But maybe if you let me go, you can have your car back. No harm done." His eyes roamed over me, weighing my fear against his own resolve. Finally, he stepped back and crossed his arms. "All right, listen. You're going to get out of my car, and you're not going to breathe a word about this to anyone. If I find out you did, or if you try to report me, I'll know. I nodded vigorously, relief flooding through me. I promise. I swear. Then get out, he ordered, and I scrambled to obey, feeling the cool night air rush in as the door swung open. As I stumbled out of the vehicle, I caught a glimpse of his expression, a strange blend of anger and something closer to fear. I took a step back, a thought suddenly crossing my mind. Hey, why do you keep it locked? The question hung in the air, and for a fleeting moment, I wondered if I had said too much. His eyes narrowed as he scrutinized me again, and I felt the weight of his gaze, a reminder that I had narrowly escaped a trap, but I remained ensnared in the web of fear he had spun. Quietly, I backed away, my heart racing, knowing that I had survived this encounter but that the night still held its secrets, lurking just beyond the shadows of the parking lot. I fled, each hurried step echoing the urgency of my near escape, my mind racing as I vowed never to take that shortcut again. Story 4, Whispers in the Dark. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the campsite as I finished setting up my tent. I had always cherished the solitude of the forest, feeling like it offered a sanctuary from the chaos of everyday life. It was just me, the chirping of crickets, and the gentle rustle of leaves. The peacefulness of the evening lulled me into a sense of security, one I would soon learn was deceptive. As darkness engulfed the campsite, I lit a small fire and settled onto my camping chair, pulling out a worn paperback novel from my backpack. The stories of distant lands and epic adventures seemed so far removed from the air around me, thickening with the scent of pine and damp earth. I lost myself in the words, page after page, the crackling fire my only companion. It was well past midnight when I finally closed the book, the flickering flames casting strange shadows that danced along the trees. I leaned back and gazed at the stars peeking through the branches above, feeling an odd sense of contentment before the chill of night wrapped around me tighter. I crawled into my tent, zipping it up snugly, and lay back on the sleeping bag, the soothing sounds of the night lulling me towards sleep. Just as I began to drift off, a sound jolted me awake. A rustling outside my tent broke the stillness, harsh against the soft murmurs of the night. My heart raced as I lay frozen, listening intently. I tried to convince myself it was just an animal. A raccoon, maybe. The thought almost calmed me, but then the rustling grew more pronounced, heavy, deliberate. I felt the hair on my arms stand on end. I held my breath, straining to hear. Would I dare to look? Curiosity tugged at me, but so did fear. I wanted to remain hidden, to just ignore it, but I had to know. I pushed the tent flap aside just enough to peer through the mesh, my heart pounding in my ears. A silhouette loomed just beyond my campsite. The figure stood still for a moment, as if contemplating my tent, before shifting slightly. I squinted, trying to discern more details, but the darkness consumed everything beyond the soft glow of my dying fire. The figure wore a heavy jacket, its outline indistinct. Was it a man or a woman? It was the stillness that terrified me. Even the night creatures seemed to have gone quiet, leaving an oppressive silence that wrapped around me. I felt vulnerable, exposed. Had I left anything out that could have drawn attention? My mind raced, recalling the items scattered around the campsite. Had my backpack been disturbed? I couldn't remember. I should have secured it better, shouldn't have left food out. A myriad of thoughts flooded my mind as I weighed my instincts. Confront the figure or hide? As I lay there, paralyzed, I realized something, the feeling of being hunted. I had come here for peace, yet now I felt the very essence of fear creeping into my bones. I hoped my presence would go unremarked, but the figure seemed to have other ideas, taking a step closer to the warmth of the firelight. I had to make a choice. My options felt limited between danger and cowardice, but I couldn't bear the thought of remaining passive. I reached for my flashlight, my fingers trembling as I fumbled for the switch. It flickered to life, the beam cutting through the darkness. I held my breath, squinting through the fabric, trying to discern any movement outside. "Hello?" My voice came out in a whisper, barely above the sound of my own heartbeat. Silence responded, the kind that felt thick and suffocating. I knew it was wrong to confront whatever was out there, but I couldn't turn back. Gathering every ounce of courage, I unzipped the tent flap and pushed it open. The cool night air rushed in, carrying with it a scent of damp earth and the faint hint of fire smoke. The figure was gone, leaving only the quiet shadows that danced among the trees. I stepped out, clutching the flashlight like a lifeline. "Who's there?" I called, my voice echoing back to me. The only reply was the rustling of leaves, as if the woods themselves were laughing at my folly. Frantically, I scanned my surroundings, the beam of light sweeping across the ground and the trees. My gut twisted as I noticed my backpack had shifted, the zipper was half open, and the contents sprawled out, as if someone had ransacked it. My sleeping bag, my food, even my emergency supplies were sprawled haphazardly around me. Panic surged through me. Had someone been watching me? I grabbed my things and began to shove them back into the bag, my fingers shaking as I struggled to regain control. I didn't want to think about who that figure might be, or how long they had been lurking. I stepped back inside the tent, heart still racing. I zipped the flap closed, securing it with trembling fingers. I could hear my breathing, fast and erratic, mingling with the distant sounds of the forest. The thought of being out there, alone and exposed, sent shivers down my spine. In the silence that followed, I tried to calm myself. I would wait until dawn, I promised. The safety of daylight would chase away whatever shadows haunted me tonight. But deep down, a dreadful sensation curled in my stomach, whispering that the night was far from over. The wind howled through the trees, an unsettling chorus that echoed the unease I felt deep in my gut. I lay in my sleeping bag, wide awake, my mind racing. The rustling outside had quieted for now, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was out there, lurking just beyond the thin fabric of my tent. The moonlight pulled around the campsite, casting long, spiraling shadows that danced between the pines. I had chosen this spot for its solitude, a welcome reprieve from my chaotic life, but now it felt like a trap. The very wilderness that had offered me peace seemed to conspire against me. I glanced at my watch. The digital numbers glowed back at me, 2:37 a.m. Every minute that ticked by felt heavier than the last. I thought of the day's hike, the quiet trails winding through the dense forest, the comforting crunch of leaves and pine needles beneath my boots. It had been a perfect day, unmarred by anything more than a fleeting thought about the loneliness of solitude. But now, that solitude was suffocating. I took a deep breath, forcing my mind to calm. Maybe I had imagined the rustling. Perhaps it was just a harmless animal lost in my campsite, seeking food. Still, I couldn't dismiss the nagging feeling that something was off. Just days before, I had read a news article about a couple who had gone missing while camping in this very region. Their fate remained a mystery, and the article had left me with an unsettling feeling. I shook my head, scolding myself for letting fear take hold so easily. Before I knew it, I was sliding out of my sleeping bag, my heart pounding as I put my feet on the cold, hard ground. I reached for the flashlight I had placed beside me, its weight reassuring in my palm. As I unzipped the tent, I held my breath, not knowing what awaited me outside. The fabric of the tent peeled away, exposing the dimly lit world beyond. I stepped outside, the chill of the night air wrapping around me like a shroud. As I scanned the area, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach when I noticed that my backpack, a staple of my camping gear, was partially unzipped. My first instinct was to reach for it, to interrogate the contents, but I hesitated. If someone was out here, it could be a trap. I gripped the flashlight tighter, the beam cutting through the darkness, illuminating the forest floor littered with fallen branches and leaves. A shiver ran down my spine, and I fought the urge to retreat back to the safety of my tent. I carefully made my way toward my backpack, my senses heightened. As I got closer, I noticed more than just the unzipped flap. The straps had been pulled, almost as if someone had been rummaging through my belongings. A wave of dread washed over me. I had everything I needed to survive out here: my food, my first aid kit, and my phone. My hand trembled as I reached down, my flashlight beam revealing the contents scattered about. Someone had gone through my stuff, and I felt completely exposed. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to gather my things and flee this horrifying landscape, but I couldn't let fear dictate my actions. I had to know what had happened. I had to confront this. Suddenly, a sound pierced the quiet, the unmistakable crunch of footsteps on twigs, getting closer. The beam of my flashlight quivered in my hand as I instinctively darted behind a nearby tree, my heart racing like a wild animal trapped in a cage. I pressed my back against the rough bark, which felt oddly comforting and wholly unsettling at the same time. My breath quickened as I peeked around the trunk, the light flickering nervously. There it was again, the soft crunch of footsteps. I strained my ears, trying to gauge the distance. Whoever or whatever was out there, they were close enough that I could almost feel their presence. The figure stepped into the edge of the moonlight, and I held my breath. It was a silhouette, vaguely human but shrouded in shadows. I could just make out the outline of a backpack slung over one shoulder, and I felt an icy finger trace my spine. I wanted to scream, to shout for help, but the words lodged in my throat. What if it was just another camper? But then why had they been tampering with my things? 1,000 scenarios played out in my mind, each more terrifying than the last. I had to choose: stay hidden and hope they would pass, or confront this person and demand answers. While my mind spun in chaotic circles, my body seemed to make the decision for me. I took a deep breath, the air cold and sharp, and stepped out from behind the tree, the flashlight beam now fixed on the figure. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaking but loud enough to cut through the tension. The figure froze, turning toward me, and for a heartbeat, I felt the raw power of fear surge through my veins. The person shifted, and the moonlight caught the glimmer of something metallic, a blade. I squinted, fear clawing at my throat. I barely registered the soft gasp that escaped my lips. The figure started moving toward me, slow and deliberate. I should have turned and run, but a magnetism rooted me in place. It was a woman, wild-eyed and disheveled. "You shouldn't be here," she rasped, her voice hoarse and frantic. My mind raced. What did she mean? "What do you want?" I managed to say, even as panic gripped my chest. "Leave." "Now," she shouted, and my instinct screamed at me to obey. Before I could process her words, she turned and fled into the darkness, disappearing deeper into the woods. I stood frozen, adrenaline coursing through me as her warning echoed in my mind. I felt suddenly vulnerable, hunted, and utterly exposed. I needed to get out of here, but my belongings were scattered. I quickly gathered what I could, my heart pounding as I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting the shadowed figure to return. As I finished stuffing my things into my backpack, I realized I had no time to waste. I needed to leave this place before whatever had driven the other woman into madness found me, too. I could hear the rustling of leaves behind me, a sound that could either be the wind or something sinister lurking in the shadows. I sprinted toward the only path leading from the campsite, the forest closing in around me, each step heavy with the weight of the unknown. The moon hung high in a velvet sky, casting erratic shapes through the thin fabric of my tent. I lay awake, my heart thumping like a war drum, each beat echoing the sheer absurdity of my situation. Just hours earlier, I had set up my camp with excitement bubbling in my chest. The trees had whispered secrets, The crackling fire had flickered shadows, and for a brief moment, I believed this solitude would heal the bruises of my life. But that was hours ago. Now, the woods had unleashed a new kind of silence, thick and oppressive, as if even the crickets were holding their breath. I shifted on my sleeping pad, straining to catch the slightest hint of sound, the slightest footfall on the damp earth outside. Rustling came again, sharper this time, the unmistakable crunch of twigs snapping beneath a heavy weight. I held my breath, the air in the tent thickening with unease. I should have felt safe here, nestled between tall pines that had stood for centuries, but all I felt was exposed. The rustling faded, then returned, closer this time, as if whatever was out there was testing the boundary where my world ended and the forest began. With dread coiling in my gut, I turned on my flashlight, the beam slicing through the tent's darkness. The light trembled in my hand, illuminating the inside of my small sanctuary, where my backpack, half-packed, lay open. My belongings had been rifled through, the contents scattered haphazardly. The unease morphed into a cold knot of fear as I scanned the tent for anything I might have left out that could serve as a weapon. A sudden noise jolted me back to the present. A figure loomed at the edge of the tent, just outside the thin fabric. I could see a silhouette, its shape distorted but unmistakably human. My heart raced as I debated between two primal instincts, to confront or to hide. "Hello?" I called out, my voice a whisper caught in a gust of wind. The figure didn't respond, didn't even flinch. Instead, it shifted slightly on its feet, and my blood turned to ice. Panic surged. I was completely alone out here, and this was no place for a confrontation. I flicked off the flashlight, plunging myself back into darkness. I could hear the figure breathing now, a low, measured rhythm that seemed too calm for the situation. I pressed myself against the fabric of the tent, feeling its thinness separate me from the unknown. My mind raced. I had left my phone in the tent's outer pocket, but I didn't dare to reach for it. The rustling grew louder, almost conspiratorial. I closed my eyes, hating myself for having let this happen, for thinking I could find solace in isolation. Then came the unmistakable sound of fabric tearing, followed by the unmistakable clatter of my gear. They were rifling through my things. A sick realization crept in that the figure knew I was inside the tent. I wasn't just a hapless camper, I had become prey. My belongings had been a breadcrumb trail leading to a hungry monster. I was outmatched, a woman with little more than a pocket knife, facing whoever lurked mere inches away. I shifted again, trying to quiet my breathing, praying for the sound of footsteps to retreat. But instead, the figure moved closer, hovered just outside the entrance. There was a moment of stillness, as if the universe held its breath along with me. I could hear my pulse, louder than the noises outside, a frantic reminder of my own fragility. Then, the rustling stopped. An eerie silence enveloped the moment, saturated with anticipation. I strained to listen, hoping to glean some understanding of what lurked beyond the thin walls of my tent. In the quiet, I felt the weight of my decisions. I had come here to escape, yet here I was, trapped. I contemplated my options. The tent had a zipper, but it felt like a cruel joke. Unzipping it could invite danger, yet staying inside left me vulnerable and exposed. Finally, I heard the unmistakable sound of movement again. This time it was retreating. My heart raced, battling curiosity against the instinct to remain hidden. I listened intently, hoping to glean some sense of purpose behind the figure's actions. But as the sounds faded into the distance, a new terror gripped me. What if they returned? I had to take action. With slow, deliberate movements, I reached for my bag, my fingers trembling as they brushed against my knife. I gripped it tightly, drawing a breath as I confronted the darkness surrounding me. As the minutes dragged on, uncertainty loomed like a looming shadow. Would they come back? Had they taken anything? My mind flashed to my belongings, the little things that made me feel like myself, my journal, my phone, my identification. I had to check. With a small intake of breath, I fumbled in the darkness until I found the zipper. It felt impossibly loud as I tugged at it, the teeth refusing to budge at first. But as the sound echoed through the night, I hesitated, every rational thought evaporating like mist. Time stretched, and just when I convinced myself that I had imagined it all, there came a sound heavy and deliberate, drawing nearer. The figure was not gone. My heart raced as I forced myself to stillness. I was alone and hunted, and in this wilderness, there was no one to hear me scream. I woke up to the sound of leaves crackling outside my tent. At first, I convinced myself it was just the wind playing tricks, but the noise persisted, rhythmic and deliberate. My heart raced, echoing in the void of the night. The fire had long since died, leaving an eerie silence wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. It was only my breath that broke the stillness, quick and shallow. I lay still, the fabric of the tent pressing against my skin as I strained to listen. The rustling continued, accompanied by the faintest shuffle, the kind that makes you question your grip on reality. I dared to peek through the small opening of the tent, the air growing colder, thick with uncertainty. The moonlight barely penetrated the trees, casting long shadows that danced across the forest floor. There, just beyond the perimeter of my tent, stood a silhouette. Tall, unmoving, almost as if it were waiting for something. My mind raced through the possibilities. A fellow camper? A ranger? Or something much worse? I pulled back into the cramped space, my instinct screaming at me to stay hidden. Yet, curiosity gnawed at me. What if it was someone who needed help? I glanced around my tent, the dim outline of my belongings barely visible. My backpack, the trusty bear spray clipped to its side, and the pocket knife rested just within arm's reach. I contemplated my next move, trapped in a battle between fear and the urge to confront whatever creature lurked outside. I gathered my courage, leaning close to the ground to peer through the mesh of my tent. The silhouette remained, waiting. I thought maybe it had heard me, but it didn't move, didn't flinch. It was as if it had tethered itself to the darkness, absorbing it. The rustling sound stopped abruptly, leaving only the faintest whisper of the wind. In that silence, my thoughts turned darker. A shiver ran down my spine as I recalled the stories I'd heard about this campground, mysterious disappearances, the whispered caution of locals. But I brushed those thoughts aside, reminding myself of my practical side. Grabbing my knife, I slid to the entrance, heart pounding in my ears. The figure had not moved, and the stillness pressed against me like a weight. I unzipped the tent slowly, the sound piercing the silence like a gunshot. My pulse quickened as I prepared to confront whatever awaited me. The moon illuminated the clearing just enough for me to see, yet shadows loomed in the corners of my vision, distorting my perceptions. I pushed the fabric aside, stepping out into the cool night air. The figure remained in place, but now I saw its posture, a casual lean against a tree, as if it owned the woods. "Hello?" My voice cracked, breaking the stillness. The figure shifted, becoming slightly clearer in the moonlight. It was a man, rugged and disheveled, a shadow of a face hidden under the brim of a weathered hat. He didn't answer, just regarded me with an intensity that sent my heart racing. I took a step back, instinctively clutching the pocket knife tighter. "Are you lost?" I tried again, forcing the words past a lump in my throat. He chuckled, a low, unsettling sound that echoed through the trees. "Lost?" "No, just passing through," he said, his voice gravelly. "Do you need help?" My instincts told me to be cautious. I could run back to my tent, but a part of me wanted to hear him out. "I think you're the one who might need some help," he replied, his gaze flickering past me, as if assessing my belongings. Suddenly, a flash of panic gripped me. I turned my head back towards the tent. I had left the zipper slightly open. In that instant, I remembered sorting through my backpack earlier, hastily packing my food and gear. My breath caught in my throat as I recalled the moment I noticed my flashlight had been removed. I had brushed it off as my own forgetfulness, but what if it hadn't been? "Hey!" I snapped, my voice now sharp and commanding. "Did you go through my stuff?" He smiled, a predatory glint in his eyes. "Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But wouldn't you like to know what I found?" I felt bile rise in my throat as dread washed over me. The forest, once a serene refuge, now felt like a trap. I calculated my chances, the knife barely feeling like enough against the threat standing before me. "I'm going back inside," I said, my voice trembling, but I forced a measure of confidence into my stance. "Go ahead," he taunted. "But you'll only be alone in the dark." I took a step backward, but not before noticing my backpack had been dragged slightly away from the tent. The weight of his presence loomed over me, and all I could think was that I wasn't just a camper anymore. I was a target. As I turned and sprinted back towards my tent, every muscle screamed for me to run, but my mind focused on survival. I ducked inside and zipped it shut, the sound of the fabric sliding against itself a poor barrier against the night. My breath came in ragged bursts, and I scrambled to gather my thoughts. I pressed my back against the wall, knife gripped in my shaking hands. I listened to the silence, punctured only by the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. Outside, the rustling returned, the man's presence still palpable. I felt hunted, vulnerable, and painfully aware that the darkness was no longer just a backdrop to my adventure. It had become an adversary. The night wore on, stretching like a dark, claustrophobic blanket over the campground. I lay in my sleeping bag, the thin material doing little to shield me from the chill that crept into my bones. The rustling outside my tent had stopped, but the air felt heavy, pregnant with suspense. I had spent countless hours poring over survival manuals and outdoor blogs, each article emphasizing the beauty and tranquility of nature, but none prepared me for this, the raw edginess of isolation. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. My mind flickered back to what I had seen, the silhouette just beyond the thin fabric of my tent, motionless and watching. I felt stupid for even considering confronting whoever or whatever was out there. The thought of stepping into the dark, uncertain what awaited me, paralyzed me. But the uncertainty of my belongings was a gnawing worry, clawing at the edges of my mind. Earlier that day, I had taken pride in my well-organized setup. I had meticulously arranged my gear, everything from my food supplies to my first aid kit, ensuring that I would enjoy a weekend of solitude and introspection. But now, I thought about the way the zipper on my backpack had been pulled half open, as if someone had sifted through my things. The realization sent a shiver of vulnerability spiraling down my spine. The flashlight lay next to me, its small body offering a semblance of security. I reached for it, fingers trembling slightly, and clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness inside the tent, illuminating the fabric walls but doing nothing to ease my dread. I needed to know if I was alone. I needed to see what was out there. In a moment of clarity, I steeled myself against the rising tide of fear. I had to confront this situation. I had come too far to let paranoia take control. I unzipped the tent flap with silent deliberation, the sound feeling more like a shout in the stillness of the night. I paused, heart pounding, and listened again. The forest was eternally silent, as if holding its breath alongside me. Tentatively, I poked my head outside, the beam of my flashlight casting erratic shadows across the ground. The trees loomed like sentinels, their branches swaying gently in the night breeze. I swept the light around, searching for any sign of movement, but all I found were the familiar shapes of the surrounding foliage, gnarled and twisted in the moonlight. I stepped out slowly, my bare feet sinking into the cool grass. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. As I moved further away from the safety of my tent, I became acutely aware of every crackle of twigs underfoot, every whisper of the wind. I felt small and exposed, a prey animal lost in the wilderness. As I approached my backpack, the sudden memory of its zipper being open crept back. I knelt down, heart pounding, and examined the contents. Everything seemed as I had left it, except for the missing granola bars. I distinctly remembered packing several. A chill danced down my spine. Had someone taken them, or was it a wayward animal? The former theory felt much more sinister, the latter too innocent to consider in the shadow of my growing paranoia. I turned around, the flashlight beam sweeping across the campground, revealing nothing but trees and the remnants of my fire pit. But still, that feeling of being watched lingered. I could almost sense a pair of unseen eyes tracking my every movement, invading my space. I swallowed hard, gazing deeper into the woods, where the darkness felt impenetrable. I remembered the camping safety tips I had read: stay vigilant, be aware of your surroundings, and trust your instincts. But who could I trust out here? Everything felt surreal, as if I had wandered into a nightmare with no exit. I glanced back at my tent, trying to convince myself it was still a safe cocoon, but the thought of returning inside felt suffocating. Then, from the corner of my eye, I caught movement, a fleeting shadow darting between the trees. My breath caught in my throat. I swung the flashlight toward it, the beam cutting through the darkness but revealing nothing. Just the whisper of branches rustling in the wind. I froze, keeping the light trained on the spot, willing myself to see something, anything. Panic whispered in my ear, urging me to turn and run, but I anchored myself to the ground, debating whether it would be smarter to retreat or confront whatever lurked in the blackness. I glanced at my backpack, conflicted. The rational part of me screamed that it was likely just a deer, an innocuous creature going about its nightly routine. But the other part, the fearful part, imagined the worst: a figure watching me, lurking in the dark, waiting for me to let my guard down. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the ominous rustling of leaves. I took a step backward, my instincts flaring a wrong move could lead to disaster. Just as I was about to make a break for it, a low growl rolled through the trees, like a distant thunderstorm. It sent a jolt of adrenaline through me, my instincts kicking into high gear. This was no deer, this was a threat. In a panic, I bolted back to the tent, heart pounding and breath quickening. I dove inside, zipping the door behind me and collapsing onto my sleeping bag. The warmth of the tent felt like a weak shield against the reality outside, but I clung to it desperately. I had to stay calm. I had to think. I could hear the rustling sound again, but this time it was close, too close. My mind raced as I tried to formulate a plan, weighing the risks of calling for help versus remaining silent. I needed to know what I was dealing with, but the thought of flicking on that flashlight again filled me with dread. I pressed my back against the tent's wall, every nerve ending tingling with anticipation. Whatever was out there was still lurking, and I was trapped in this thin barrier, feeling more vulnerable than ever. The night was closing in, and I was now alone. The weight of the darkness bore down on me, and in that moment, I understood the true meaning of fear, the kind that paralyzed you, kept you hidden, but never truly safe. Story 5, Pursued by Footsteps. The night draped itself over the city like a heavy, suffocating blanket, muffling sounds and distorting shadows. I had underestimated how late it had gotten, the hour creeping up on me as I finished the third run of drinks at the Crooked Lantern. The last call bell had echoed, a haunting reminder that my time there was up. I knew the walk home would take me through empty streets, but I was too buzzed to care. The first few blocks were uneventful, the street lamps casting a feeble glow over cracked sidewalks and littered gutters. I shoved my hands deep into my pockets, the cool air biting at my skin. The wind whispered through the trees, almost coaxing me to hurry along. I welcomed the brisk pace, hoping to shake off the creeping unease that had settled into my stomach since I stepped outside. As I turned onto an unfamiliar side street, I noticed the headlights shimmering behind me. A car, far too close for comfort, rolled along slowly, keeping pace with my hurried footsteps. I glanced back, my heart racing in a sudden panic. The vehicle was a dark sedan, its windshield gleaming like a predator's eye. I quickened my stride, the echo of my shoes against the asphalt reverberating in the silence. With each turn I made, the car followed, always there, lurking just out of reach. My chest tightened, a knot forming as the reality of my situation sank in. I could feel a growing sense of dread gnawing at my resolve, making my decisions heavy. Should I confront the driver? Or find a way to lose them? Both choices felt like stepping onto a knife's edge. I turned abruptly, feigning nonchalance as I tried to blend into the shadows of the alleyway, my breath shallow and fast. The car paused at the intersection, headlights illuminating the ground ahead, casting ominous shadows that danced like specters. I pressed my back against the cold brick wall, heart hammering against my ribs. The vehicle rolled forward, creeping closer, and I could see the silhouettes of the driver and passenger. A surge of anger mingled with fear. Who did they think they were, stalking me like this? I took a deep breath, trying to muster my courage. Confronting them felt reckless, but the idea of cowering in the dark, paralyzed by fear, was worse. I had to take control. I stepped out from the shadows, squaring my shoulders. Confidently, I walked towards the center of the street, squinting against the glare of the headlights. The car halted, the engine idling with an unsettling calm. I raised a hand, gesturing for the driver to roll down the window. The sound of the glass scraping against metal broke the eerie silence as it slid down, revealing a woman with disheveled hair and piercing eyes. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The words felt foreign, heavy in my mouth. "What are you doing out here?" she asked, her voice laced with an unsettling calm. The tone sent a shiver down my spine. "I'm just trying to get home," I replied, glancing at her passenger, a man whose face remained obscured in shadow. "Why are you following me?" "Just looking for someone," she said, her smile tight and devoid of warmth. "You seem lost." I felt a dangerous tug in my gut. "I'm not lost. I'm fine." The tension hung thick in the air, almost palpable, and I could hear the faint thud of my heart in my ears. An instinctive part of me screamed to run, but my feet felt glued to the pavement. She leaned closer, her eyes narrowing as if trying to decipher my very soul. "Are you sure about that?" she probed, studying me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "This is a strange place to be wandering at night. Are you going to just sit there?" I snapped, anger bubbling up to mask my fear. "If you're looking for someone, maybe you should try elsewhere." A flicker of surprise crossed her face, followed by something darker. The passenger shifted in his seat, his outline becoming more pronounced. He grinned, a predatory smile that sent a chill racing down my spine. "We're just having a chat," he said, his voice smooth but laced with menace. "Isn't that right?" Something deep inside me screamed that this encounter was wrong. I took a step back, my instincts flaring as I glanced at the street behind me. I could turn and run. Maybe I could make it to the main road, maybe I was just overreacting. But as I turned, the car's engine revved, and the headlights blared ominously, illuminating the darkness. "Don't go yet," the woman said, her voice almost coaxing. "We're just getting started." I felt a surge of panic, adrenaline flooding my system. I bolted down the street, my legs pumping furiously as I ran. The sound of tires screeching followed me, the car's pursuit relentless. I could hear the voices behind me, taunting, laughing, and it was all I could do to keep my breath steady, to not look back. I didn't stop until I reached the main road, my heart racing and lungs burning. Just as I glanced back, the car was gone, swallowed up by the darkness. I leaned against a lamppost, gasping for air, the adrenaline still coursing through me. I had escaped for now. But as I turned to continue my walk home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had only just encountered the beginning of something far worse than I had ever imagined. The forgotten side street had stirred something awakened, and I knew I would never forget it. The night was deepening around me as I stepped off the main road and onto a side street, its shadows wrapping around me like a thick fog. My heart thumped heavily in my chest, echoing the rhythmic crunch of gravel beneath my feet. The street lamps flickered overhead, casting awkward pools of light that did little to dispel the surrounding darkness. I glanced back, and there it was again, the silhouette of a car, just a few paces behind. It moved slowly, deliberately, like a predator stalking its prey. My stomach knotted as I quickened my pace, the sound of my breathing rising sharply in my ears. Each time I turned, I could see the faint glow of its headlights tracing the curve of the road, relentless in its pursuit. And then it stretched into an eternity, and the chill of the night seeped into my bones. I tried to rationalize what was happening. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Perhaps the driver was as lost as I was, following their own path through the maze of streets. Still, the gnawing feeling in my gut told me otherwise. There was something deliberate in the way the car mirrored my movements. I broke into a jog, my shoes slapping against the pavement as I took a sharp left onto another narrow street. The car's headlights flared behind me, and a wave of panic surged through me. I could feel the weight of its gaze, the oppressive pressure of being watched. My mind raced with scenarios, each one darker than the last. Was it a coincidence, or was I about to become the subject of a sinister game? I darted down an alley, hoping the shadows would swallow me whole. The entrance was littered with debris, the scent of decay wafting up from the garbage bins that crowded the sides. I pressed myself against the cool brick wall, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The car rolled past, its engine a low growl in the stillness, and I held my breath as I watched its headlights slice through the darkness. As it turned the corner, I felt a momentary surge of relief, but it was short-lived. I knew it wouldn't be long before it would circle back. I needed a plan, a way to lose my unseen stalker. I quickly scanned my surroundings, searching for any escape routes. The alley stretched on, its path narrowing until it opened up into a small courtyard. There, I spotted a row of bicycles leaning against a wall, rusted but intact. With a surge of adrenaline, I crept towards them, my heart racing in anticipation. If I could grab a bike, I might just be able to put enough distance between me and that car. I picked one, the grips crusted with years of neglect, and hoisted it from the ground. As I swung my leg over the seat, I heard the unmistakable sound of tires crunching against gravel. The car had found me again. I pedaled furiously, the bike creaking beneath me as I navigated the uneven ground. The alleyway twisted and turned, the shadows loomed closer, heightening my sense of urgency. I could hear the car revving behind me, its engine roaring with frustration at its inability to catch me. I stole a glance over my shoulder. The headlights were dimmer now, but they were still there, a ghostly beacon of dread. I burst onto a street that was wider and better lit, the glow of storefronts offering a semblance of safety. I risked another look back. The car had slowed, its headlights flickering like a taunting laugh in the night. I scanned the area, deciding to weave through the crowd of late-night revelers milling about, my heart pounding in time with the rhythm of their laughter and chatter. My plan was simple: blend in. I weaved through the crowd, feeling the warmth of bodies brushing against me, but the anxiety coursing through my veins made it hard to breathe. I glanced over my shoulder again, searching for the car, for any sign that I was still being hunted. But the street was clear now, the shadows stretching deep behind the brightly lit storefronts. For a moment, I thought maybe I had escaped. But as I emerged from the throng of humanity, I felt the air change. A suffocating stillness settled around me. The laughter faded into the background, and I stood alone on the corner of the street, heart racing, unsure of where to go next. I hesitated, feeling an electric current of dread. Then I saw it. The car was parked a short distance away, its engine humming softly. It sat there, unassuming, but I could feel the weight of its presence pressing against me. I knew I couldn't stay here. The crowd might not protect me forever. I needed to move again. I turned away from the car and walked briskly, keeping my gaze forward, willing my pace to match the pulse of my heart. I could almost hear the rhythmic beat in my ears as if it were a drum signaling an approaching chaos. But fear quickened my steps. There was a sudden rustling behind me, and instinctively, I turned. The car's engine roared to life, cutting through the night like a knife. In that moment, I felt the ground shift beneath me. I realized I was still being hunted. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to find safety. I sprinted down the street, my feet pounding against the pavement. My breath came in ragged gasps as I turned onto another side street, praying that I could finally lose them. I glanced back one last time, but the car was right there, chasing me like a dark omen. The thrill of terror coursed through me as I realized that my decision had to be made now: confront the driver or flee deeper into the labyrinth of the night. With no time left to think, I chose the only option that offered a flicker of hope. I ran. I had spent the evening at Doug's, sipping cheap beer and pretending laughter drowned out the creeping dread that had settled in my chest. The warmth of the apartment lingered on my skin like an unwelcome reminder of what lay outside, a chill that gnawed at me, even as I stepped out into the night. The streetlights flickered above me, casting long shadows that danced on the cracked pavement. As I turned onto the main road, I noticed that familiar sensation creeping back in, the prickling awareness of being watched. I quickened my pace, half expecting to see someone lurking in the darkness, but the street remained desolate. The silence enveloped me, a heavy blanket that muffled even the rustle of leaves in the faint wind. Just as I began to relax, I heard it, the low hum of an engine. I glanced over my shoulder and spotted a car, black, unmarked, its headlights dimmed. It moved slowly, trailing me like a shadow. My heart raced. Perhaps it was just a coincidence, but my gut churned. I turned left onto a side street, hoping to lose the vehicle behind me. The car followed. I picked up my pace, adrenaline fueling my steps. Lurching onto another winding alley, I stole a glance back. The headlights glared, more pronounced now, illuminating the empty road behind me. My breaths came in quick bursts, and I fought the instinct to sprint. Running would make me look guilty, suspicious. I could feel the weight of the driver's gaze on my back, the unseen eyes burning into me. Turning again, I ducked into a narrow passage flanked by towering brick buildings. I could hear the car still, its engine softening as it slowed. Heart hammering against my rib cage, I pressed myself against the cold, rough wall, hidden from the road. I waited, listening, hoping the driver would grow bored and leave. Then, silence. I held my breath, peering around the edge of the building. The street was empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. Cautiously, I stepped back into the open. The car was gone. I glanced frantically up and down the street. Everything looked the same, yet there was an unsettling stillness in the air. With a fragile sense of relief, I resumed my walk, but the unease settled back in, thicker than before. I reached a fork in the road. Left led to the main thoroughfare, well lit and populated, while right veered into a dismal dead end. I hesitated. The darkness beckoned, but I couldn't risk a repeat of my earlier ordeal. I took the left path. As I neared the intersection, I glanced at my watch. The hour was late, and with every step, I felt the weight of the night pressing down on me. A soft glow flickered in the distance, the neon sign of a diner promising a reprieve from the shadows. Suddenly, I heard it again, the engine. It was distant, but unmistakable. I looked over my shoulder. There it was, creeping back into view, the same black car, its headlights piercing the night. Panic surged through me. I turned abruptly and headed towards the diner, where light and warmth represented safety. The sound of the tires rolling over the asphalt quickened behind me, and I breathed heavily, almost gasping. As I sprinted towards the diner, I felt the adrenaline surge through my veins. I didn't dare look back. I could hear the car now, close enough that my heart plummeted. The tires screeched, a violent sound that echoed off the empty buildings, and I burst into the diner just as the bell jingled overhead. The warmth engulfed me, and I stumbled inside, slamming the door shut behind me. I took a moment to catch my breath, my hands trembling as I nodded to the few patrons scattered in the booths. The waitress, an older woman whose face wore the wear of many long nights, glanced at me with concern. "You all right, hon?" she asked, her voice thick with the weariness of someone who had seen too much. "Yeah, just. I think someone's following me," I panted, scanning the windows for the telltale headlights. She nodded slowly, her brow furrowing as she wiped down the counter. "You can't be too careful out here at night." "You!" The bell above the door jingled again. My heart seized. I turned to see the black car parked just outside, its silhouette cutting a menacing figure against the glow of the diner lights. My breath caught in my throat as the driver emerged, a man, tall and lean, his face obscured by the darkness of his hoodie. "Stay inside," the waitress said, her voice low. She moved toward the phone, her eyes darting nervously between me and the menacing figure by the door. I felt trapped, a trapped animal with nowhere to go. I glanced at the other patrons. They were oblivious, engrossed in their late-night conversations, but I could see their faces reflected in the glass, concern, curiosity, and confusion as they followed my gaze. I had to do something. The man stood there, motionless, his eyes searching. For me. I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles whitening. Should I confront him, demand to know why he was following me? Or should I wait, hiding until he left? But the more I hesitated, the more the dread coiled around my heart. I made a decision. Adrenaline surged once more, and I turned towards the door, my resolve hardening. I would confront him. I would not be a victim in the shadows of this city. As I stepped outside, the cool air hit my face, and I faced the driver, my heart pounding louder than the night. "Why are you following me?" I shouted, my voice echoing in the emptiness. The figure paused, then lifted his head, revealing a face that was eerily calm, almost too calm. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm not following you," he replied, his voice smooth, almost mocking. "I'm just waiting for my friend." My stomach twisted. "Your friend? Here?" "Yeah," he said, glancing over my shoulder. "You should really keep an eye on your surroundings. It's not safe out here." In that moment, I felt the weight of the night settle back in, its oppressive presence closing in as his words wrapped around me like a noose. I had to get away from him, away from this feeling, but I had stepped too far into the abyss. The diner's light flickered behind me, the laughter and warmth now a distant memory. I was out in the dark, and the shadows were creeping closer. I had always prided myself on my instincts, especially in the city, where shadows danced and alleys whispered secrets. Yet, that night, as I navigated the dimly lit streets, those instincts gnawed at me like hungry rats. The chill in the air wrapped around my bones, and the distant sound of my footsteps echoed against the empty buildings like a warning bell. The streetlights flickered, casting long shadows that twisted and turned, making me feel like I was being watched. With each step, I kept glancing over my shoulder, an unease settling in the pit of my stomach. It had started innocently enough. A few blocks from the bar where I had spent the evening with friends, I noticed a car trailing me. Its headlights were off, and in the thick darkness, it could have been an apparition. I quickened my pace, my heart thumping louder in my chest. The car drew nearer, creeping along the street. I forced myself to take a deep breath, attempting to calm the rising tide of fear. Rationality kicked in, urging me to find a logical explanation. Perhaps it was just a fellow night owl, or maybe someone lost. But when I turned down a side street, the car turned with me, its presence like a suffocating blanket. Adrenaline surged through my veins. I shouldn't have reacted like this. I should have remained calm. My mind raced through potential scenarios as I glanced into the car's darkened windows. I could see nothing, just the reflection of the streetlights bouncing off the glass, a smudge of fear in the backdrop of urban indifference. As I turned onto another corner, the car followed. The tension coiled tighter within me. I considered making a dash for it, but the thought of running made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. What if it was someone dangerous? What if I stumbled into the wrong alley? My memories of the city's brutal underbelly flashed before me, the news stories, the warnings from friends, merchants of despair lurking in shadows. I needed a plan. I peered into the storefronts lining the street, desperate for a distraction, a way to lose my pursuer. Just ahead was a narrow alleyway, shrouded in darkness. There was a risk in hiding, but standing out in the open felt like waiting for the predator to pounce. I ducked into the alley, my heart racing. The moment I stepped into the alley, the sounds of the street faded, replaced by the unsettling silence that draped over the pavement. I pressed my back against the cold brick wall, panting softly as I strained to hear the cars approach. Would it pass by, or was the driver aware of my escape? I peered around the corner. The car glided slowly past, its headlights illuminating the alleyway with a ghostly glow. I recoiled instinctively, holding my breath. It was a beat-up sedan, the kind that blended into the backdrop of urban decay. The driver's window was slightly cracked, and I could see the silhouette of a face turned sharply toward me, scanning the surroundings. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. The car continued down the road, but I knew it wouldn't take long for the driver to realize I was gone. My heart raced as I weighed my options. Confronting the driver could lead to danger, but standing still felt like surrendering to fate. I needed to brave the streets again, but how could I be sure that I wouldn't merely be running straight into the jaws of a predator? I pressed forward, emerging from the shadows of the alley onto the next street. The deserted pavement stretched before me like an invitation to inevitable confrontation. I glanced back, half expecting to find the car behind me, but it seemed to have disappeared into the darkness. Still, the tension remained, coiling tightly around my chest. What could I do? As I walked, I began to formulate a plan. I needed to make my way to the nearby diner, a beacon of light that could offer safety, and if nothing else, a crowd. I picked up my pace, a mix of hope and trepidation propelling me forward. Just as I neared the intersection, I heard the familiar soft hum of an engine. I froze, dread seeping into my bones. The car had turned again, and this time its headlights flickered back on, cutting through the darkness like a knife. I ducked into another side street, praying it would lead me away from whatever nightmare was pursuing me. The car's engine roared to life, and I could hear it revving, almost like a predator sharpening its claws. My stomach churned as I sprinted into the night, dodging trash cans and waste bins, every corner an uncertain gamble. I didn't dare look back. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of fear anchoring me to the ground. I spotted a flicker of neon in the distance, the diner. My heart raced as I staggered toward the refuge of light and humanity. Just as I was about to reach the entrance, I dared a glance behind me. The car had slowed, creeping along the street, its headlights cutting through the night. I pushed through the door, the bell above jingling as if announcing my escape. As I stepped inside, the warmth wrapped around me like a comforter tossed over shivering shoulders. I turned quickly, scanning the diner's interior, and my eyes landed on the window. The car had stopped just outside, its engine idling like a predator waiting for its prey to emerge. My pulse raced as I took a seat at the counter. The waitress, a tired-looking woman with dark circles under her eyes, gave me a nod of acknowledgement. I ordered coffee, hands trembling, and stole another glance outside. The driver sat still, just beyond the glass, shrouded in darkness. Was I safe? I didn't know. All I could do was wait, watch, and hope that the night would turn more forgiving. I had thought my heart would settle after leaving the bar, but the thought of that car trailing me kept it hammering against my ribs like a caged animal. I could still hear the faint rumble of its engine behind me, an agonizing reminder that I wasn't alone on these desolate streets. The pale glow of streetlights flickered like dying stars in the murky night, casting elongated shadows that seemed to dance with sinister intent. As I passed the corner of Maple and 7th, I glanced over my shoulder, catching a glimpse of the car. It was a dark sedan, nothing distinctive about it, just a sleek, menacing shape that blended into the shadows. My pulse quickened. It had been following me since I left the bar, maneuvering through the vacant streets with a deliberation that felt predatory. Each time I turned, I could see its headlights dim briefly, a silent acknowledgement that it did not intend to lose me. With each push of my legs, the night air grew thicker, heavy with an unshakable sense of dread. I picked up my pace, nearly breaking into a run as I took a sharp left onto a side street, one that I hoped would lead me safely away. The faint sound of tires on asphalt persisted, unwavering, relentless. It was as if I were the prey in a sick game of cat and mouse. I could feel my breaths coming quicker, a shallow rhythm of panic. The houses lining the street loomed overhead, darkened windows resembling lifeless eyes. No one was awake to help me. I was utterly alone. I cursed myself for not bringing my phone. Just a simple text would have sufficed to help. I'm being followed. Yet I stood here, the night becoming increasingly sinister. I turned again, this time onto a narrower alley, the asphalt now replaced by cobblestones that gave a haunted echo to my hurried footsteps. My mind raced, contemplating my options. Should I confront the driver, risk it all in a face-to-face encounter, or continue running like a coward? Every logical thought urged me to take the latter. Yet my curiosity clawed at me, whispering that I needed to know who was behind the wheel. I paused, pressed against the cool brick wall of an abandoned storefront, heart pounding as I listened. The car had slowed. I could hear the faintest sound of the engine idling, an ominous hum that sent a shiver down my spine. If I moved too quickly, I risked being spotted. But if I stayed here, I would remain paralyzed by fear. Gathering my courage, I slowly edged my head around the corner, peering into the dim light spilling from the street lamp. The sedan was parked a few yards away, its driver's side door ajar. A silhouette leaned against the car, a dark figure shrouded in shadows. I couldn't make out the face, but something in the hunch of their shoulders was deeply unsettling. Should I call out? Demand to know what they wanted? The conflict roiled within me. The longer I stood there, the more my imagination spiraled into horrific scenarios. What if they were armed? What if they were simply waiting for me to make a move? In that moment, I felt like a marionette on a fraying string, my instincts tugging me to flee while reason urged me to stay. Suddenly, the figure shifted, their head turning sharply in my direction. I ducked back behind the wall, heart leaping into my throat. I could hear my own breath, shallow and rapid, as I pressed my back against the cold, unyielding brick. How long could I remain hidden? I needed a plan. The figure returned to the car, rummaging through the glove compartment. My pulse quickened as I caught a glimpse of metal glinting in the pale light. I couldn't tell if it was a weapon or something innocuous. Forcing myself to take a deep breath, I decided this was my chance to escape. I darted back into the alley, moving quietly but swiftly, my senses heightened. The darkness felt thicker now, wrapping around me like a shroud. I could no longer hear the sedan, and I didn't dare look back to confirm if it had followed. My feet moved instinctively, navigating the twists and turns of the streets I had walked countless times before. As I distanced myself from the alley, I made a turn onto a main road, relief washing over me when I spotted a convenience store ahead, its neon lights flickering with a warm glow. Safety was just a few strides away. I pushed through the door, nearly colliding with the cashier, a middle-aged man who raised an eyebrow at my disheveled appearance. "What's wrong with you?" he asked, concern lacing his voice. "Someone's following me," I gasped, feeling the adrenaline surge through my veins. "A car. I don't know what they want." Without a second thought, he locked the doors, the clink of the mechanism echoing in the small space. He gestured for me to sit on a stool by the counter, and I did, my hands trembling as I replayed the harrowing moments in my mind. "Do you want me to call the cops?" he asked, the initial skepticism replaced with genuine worry. "Yes," I managed to say, but as he picked up the phone, my insides twisted. What if it was too late? I could still feel the sensation of the car's headlights boring into my back, the looming threat that I might have just escaped with mere seconds to spare. The ringing of the phone and the murmurs of the cashier were overwhelmed by the clamor of my own heart, each beat reminding me that the night wasn't over yet. And somewhere out there, in the black abyss beyond those walls, a shadow still stalked me, waiting for just the right moment to strike. Story 6, Platform of Shadows. The dim light of the train platform flickered above me, casting long shadows that danced across the concrete. A gust of cold wind rustled the leaves of a nearby tree, sending a shiver down my spine. I glanced at my watch, noting that the train was running late. It was already past midnight, and I had been waiting for what felt like hours. The chill of the night air mixed with the unease creeping into my stomach. That was when I noticed him. A man stood a few feet away, slightly hunched over, his hands twitching at his sides. I could barely see his face in the flickering light, but the outline of his figure was unsettling. He mumbled to himself, phrases I couldn't quite catch, punctuated by sudden movements that seemed erratic. My instinct screamed at me to leave, but the only way out was back down the stairs, away from the platform. I tried to pull my gaze away, to focus on the distant rumble of approaching trains, but something held my attention. The man shifted closer, almost imperceptibly. I took a step back, feeling the cool metal of the railing against my back. His mumbling grew louder, and my heart raced. It felt like a game, a slow-motion dance where I was a half step behind, trying to stay out of reach. I shifted my weight to my left foot, then right, scanning the platform for any sign of life. The benches, usually occupied by tired travelers or couples whispering sweet nothings, were empty. It was just me and him, this strange man who swayed slightly, as if caught in an invisible breeze. My fight or flight response kicked in, but fleeing felt like a coward's choice. What if he followed me? The train tracks glistened under the flurry of lights, and I focused on the distant sound of a train approaching. Relief washed over me. My escape was almost at hand. But my relief was short-lived, as the man shuffled forward, blocking my path to the edge of the platform. The rumble of the train grew louder, drowning out the chaos in my mind, but I couldn't tear my gaze away from him. He stopped just a couple of feet away, his eyes darting around as if he could see things I couldn't. My breath hitched. "Excuse me," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't respond, continuing to mumble and sway. I felt my pulse quicken, the weight of his presence pressing in on me like a heavy shroud. With the train speeding toward us, I felt a surge of adrenaline. I couldn't just wait here, paralyzed. My mind raced, calculating my options. The train would arrive in seconds, and I had to make a choice. I could push past him, but that felt dangerous. I could scream, but who would hear me? As the lights of the train broke through the darkness, and its horn pierced the air, I knew I needed to act. I took a cautious step toward the edge of the platform, pretending to be focused on the train, but I was keenly aware of him watching me, his silence more terrifying than any shout. The train screeched to a halt, vibrating the ground beneath my feet. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a reminder of my predicament. The doors slid open with a mechanical hiss, revealing a dimly lit compartment. I leaned forward, ready to jump onto the train, but the man shifted, blocking the entrance just as I expected to step inside. Panic surged through me. I didn't want to confront him directly, but I couldn't stay here either. "Please," I said, desperation creeping into my voice. "I need to get on." The urgency was clear, but he only tilted his head, his mumbling lowering to a near inaudible whisper. The train's doors remained open, an invitation, but he didn't move. The air between us felt alive, electric, and charged. I glanced over my shoulder. The platform remained empty. The world outside this moment dissolved into shadows. "Just step aside," I pleaded, my voice shaking. "I won't hurt you." But my words hung in the air, unanswered. I took another step closer to the train, feeling the vibrations of the engine beneath me, the rush of wind swirling around my legs. Time stretched painfully. He jerked slightly, then looked directly at me, his eyes wide and glazed, as if he were waking from a dream. "You don't want to go in there," he said suddenly, his voice gravelly and harsh. "It's not safe." Fear gripped my throat. What did he mean? I needed to get away from him. "I don't have a choice," I replied, my eyes darting back to the train, the open cabin now a beacon of hope. He took a half step back, finally giving me a glimpse of freedom. But something deep inside me hesitated. I could feel the weight of his gaze, the tension thick as I made my decision. I could no longer wait, and I had to act before I lost my chance. I rushed forward, squeezing past him, the stench of sweat and stale cigarettes lingering in the air as I entered the train. I barely made it inside when the doors slid shut with a finality that echoed in my mind. The train jerked forward, pulling away from the platform, and I leaned against the cool metal interior, trying to catch my breath. I glanced back through the window, and there he stood, a lone figure against the dark backdrop of the platform, eyes still fixed on me. The train picked up speed, carrying me away from that station, but the unease remained, gnawing at the edges of my mind. What had I escaped, and what had I left behind? I could still hear his voice ringing in my ears, the warning that lingered long after the train left the platform. I stood rigidly on the cold, tiled platform, the fluorescent lights above flickering like the frantic beats of my heart. The dim glow cast long shadows, stretching towards the edges of the platform, where the night consumed everything else. The train I had been waiting for was late 10 minutes, then 15. I checked the time on my phone again, a futile gesture, as there was no change in its relentless march forward. The chill wrapped around my limbs, settling deep in my bones. I hugged my coat tighter, my breath visible in the frigid air. The platform, usually filled with the hum of chatter and the rustle of movement, was eerily quiet. The only sound was the soft, rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall, each tick feeling like a countdown to something unknown. That was when I noticed him. A man stood too close, a few feet away, but the distance felt smaller than it was. He was muttering to himself, the sound barely audible over the clock's relentless ticking. His clothes were disheveled, an oversized jacket that looked like it hadn't seen the inside of a washer in weeks. As he shifted, I caught sight of his face, gaunt and shadowed, with wild, darting eyes that seemed to miss nothing. My body tensed as I tried to ignore him, forcing my eyes back to the dark tracks that stretched endlessly into the night. I could feel the weight of his gaze, as if he were studying me, weaving his thoughts into a tapestry of unpredictability. I swallowed hard, trying to will myself to step farther away. Yet, something held me there, a mix of curiosity and fear, an instinct I couldn't shake. The man's mumbling grew louder, syllables tumbling out in a disjointed rhythm that sent a shiver down my spine. I turned slightly, catching remnants of fragmented words. "They're coming. You don't know. Trains won't save you." My heart raced. I didn't want to turn my back on him, but I felt the pull to check for my train again. The platform was empty, the glass doors to the station locked tight. Panic simmered just beneath the surface. The late-night train schedule was often erratic, filled with gaps that stretched longer than they should. I glanced at the exits, weighed my options, but the thought of walking away from the platform felt like leaving behind a lifeline. The man shifted closer, and I could see his hands twitching at his sides. He began to pace, muttering more frantically, hands threading through his hair. "You have to listen. They'll get you, they'll." His words trailed off, lost in the stillness. I felt my breath hitch in my throat as a train's distant whistle echoed through the night, a sound that sent a jolt of hope through me, but the man stepped directly in front of me, blocking my view of the oncoming lights. My heart raced as the train appeared, a dark mass rolling toward us, screeching against the tracks with an ear-piercing whistle. "Get away from me," I blurted, the words escaping before I could stop them. His eyes widened at my outburst, and for a moment, I saw clarity flash across his face, a flicker of sanity before the storm returned. "Don't let them take you," he shouted, voice hoarse, arms flailing uncontrollably. The train's headlights illuminated the platform, casting a harsh glow over us both. I was trapped. The train screeched to a stop, and the doors slid open with a hiss, revealing dark interiors that promised escape. But the man stood directly in my path, eyes wild, blocking my entrance. My instinct screamed at me to run. The seconds felt like hours. I weighed my options, my mind racing. If I didn't act soon, I would miss the train, but if I pushed past him, what might he do? "Please, just step aside," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He looked at me, confusion flickering across his features, but he didn't move. I could hear the low murmur of the train's engine, the world beyond those doors beckoning me. The lights of the train illuminated the platform entirely, revealing the scattered debris and dirt beneath my feet. I took a half step back, giving myself more space, trying to appear less of a threat. "I just need to get on." He took a step forward, closer than I was comfortable with, the smell of sweat and something sour wafting toward me. "They'll take you next. You don't know. You have to stay here." I couldn't let the growing sense of dread consume me. I had to think. I scanned the area behind me, an empty platform, long, barren stretches on either side. There was no one in sight. My throat tightened as I took a deep breath, desperate to quell the rising panic. In one swift motion, the man lunged, and I darted sideways, slipping past him with a surge of adrenaline. I shoved myself into the train just as the doors began to slide shut. I felt the rush of air as they closed, a thin barrier between me and the chaos outside. Inside, the dim lights flickered, revealing empty seats. I could still hear him shouting, frantically banging on the doors. "Don't go. You'll never escape." The train lurched into motion, pulling away from the platform, and I sank into a seat, my heart pounding violently against my rib cage. But the echoes of his words lingered, wrapping around me like the cold night air. I stared out the window, watching the platform fade into darkness, a sense of foreboding curling in my stomach. I thought I had escaped. But as the train rattled along the tracks, a thought nagged at me. What if it wasn't over? What if this was only the beginning? The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, flickering occasionally as if they, too, were in a state of unease. I stood on the platform, my breath forming wispy clouds in the chill of the late night air, and wrapped my coat tighter around myself. The faint sound of the train's whistle echoed in the distance, a promise of arrival, yet in this moment it felt more like an omen. The platform was empty but for me and a disheveled man who lurked too close for comfort. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, mumbling to himself in low, incoherent bursts that twisted my stomach. I could see the scruff of his beard peppered with gray, his hair unkempt, and a wild look in his eyes that darted around as if he were in a constant state of alert. He had a tattered backpack slung over one shoulder, its contents spilling out slightly, as if even his belongings were desperate to escape. Each time I glanced at him, he seemed to sense my scrutiny, and would pause mid-mutter, his gaze flicking toward me before he continued his rambling. The train whistle sounded again, closer now, but the dread in my gut tightened, making me hesitate. I could have pushed past him, but something about the way he shifted, as though he were a cornered animal, made me apprehensive. I stepped back, trying to distance myself from his unpredictable movements. The platform was long, yet I chose to stay at the far end, my eyes darting toward the direction of the train, willing it to arrive faster. I felt foolish for being so paranoid, but the late hour and the dim lighting played tricks on my mind. Shadows stretched longer with each flicker of the light, and the wind carried whispers that made me shiver. As the train's headlights pierced the darkness, illuminating the platform, I felt a surge of hope that the ordeal would soon be over. My heart raced with relief as the train screeched to a halt, its doors sliding open with a mechanical sigh. But my relief turned to horror as I realized a man had stepped forward, positioning himself directly in front of the opening. His body swayed slightly, like a pendulum caught in a loop, and he continued to mumble, oblivious to my presence. The other passengers who had gathered around me were boarding, but I felt frozen. "Excuse me," I said, my voice barely rising above a whisper. I cleared my throat and tried again, more forcefully this time. "Excuse me." He didn't respond, his eyes glazed over as he stared off into the distance, lost in his own chaotic world. I felt the panic rise within me, a knot of fear tightening in my throat. I needed to act, but the only thoughts swirling in my mind were of my own safety. I could push past him, risk his unpredictable reaction, or wait and hope he would move. Each second stretched into an eternity, and I glanced back at the crowd. They were slipping into the train, glancing at me with mild curiosity, but none offered to intervene. I shifted on my feet, considering my options. The sound of the train's engine rumbled ominously, and I could almost hear the whispers of my own racing thoughts, "Just go." But I hesitated too long. The man shifted, his eyes snapping to mine with unsettling clarity. He took a half step toward me, his breath coming in ragged bursts, and in that moment, I saw a flash of something in his gaze and intensity that sent shivers down my spine. "Help me," he mumbled, the words slurred and harsh. "They're coming for me." The hair on my arms stood on end. I couldn't decipher what he meant, but the desperation in his voice echoed an unsettling truth. I instinctively took a step back, and he mirrored my movement, his body blocking the entrance to the train like a stone wall. "Please," I said, my voice trembling. "I just need to get on the train." He didn't move, his eyes narrowing as if assessing whether I posed a threat or not. The train's horn blared again, more insistent this time, and I could almost feel the vibrations in my bones. I scanned the platform, the darkness closing in around us, and it struck me that I was entirely alone with him, surrounded by the shadows that danced in the corner of my vision. I shifted my weight to one side, glancing down the platform, considering if I could outrun him. But the train would leave soon, and I couldn't let that happen. I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves, and mustered every ounce of confidence I could find. "Please," I implored again, my voice more firm. "Step aside. There are others who need to board too." His lips twisted into a grimace, something darker lurking beneath the surface of his madness. "You don't understand," he insisted, his voice rising, resonating with a fervor that sent my heart racing. They're coming for all of us. I felt the first rush of genuine fear, the primal instinct to flee battling with the need for survival. The train engine roared, rattling my bones, a menacing reminder that time was running out. I had to make a decision. In a flash of determination, I took a single step forward, trying to slip past him. He recoiled, his arm shooting out to block me, and I caught a whiff of stale sweat and something else, something rotten. Without thinking, I pivoted on my heel and sprinted toward the edge of the platform. The train doors began to close, and I lunged, just as I heard him shout behind me, "You can't escape." I felt the wind of the train as I pushed my body through the gap, tumbling into the compartment just as the doors slammed shut. The world blurred behind me, the man's figure shrinking into the distance. I leaned against the glass, gasping for breath as the train pulled away, the rhythm of the tracks echoing in my heart. I could still hear his voice, twisted and desperate, following me into the night. The wind curled around the platform, whispering through the iron beams overhead as I waited for the train that seemed perpetually delayed. I had never liked late-night travel. The quietness of the platform felt like a shroud, heavy and suffocating. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting an eerie glow over the shadows, making the space appear both stark and suspicious. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, glancing at my watch once more. The digital numbers glared back at me, 11:43 p.m. I sighed, the sound swallowed by the stillness. It was then I noticed him, a man standing too close, just a few feet away. He swayed slightly, his unkempt hair falling into his eyes as he mumbled to himself. I couldn't catch the words, but the erratic rhythm of his speech sent a shiver down my spine. I forced myself to look away, staring instead at the tracks, listening for the distant rumble of the approaching train. But my eyes couldn't help but drift back to the man. He wore a faded jacket, 2 sizes too large, and his pants hung low on his hips, threads dangling like the sanity I sensed slipping away from him. Each time he turned his head, I felt the blood rush from my face. "Let it go," I whispered to myself, trying to breathe through the apprehension clawing at my throat. But my heart betrayed me, beating faster with each passing moment. I should have moved to another section of the platform, but something rooted me in place. Was it fear of looking weak? Or cowardice in the face of a stranger? I couldn't tell. As the minutes tripped by, the man began to jerk his head, as though he were responding to someone invisible standing beside him. A part of me wanted to turn and leave the station entirely, to find another way home. Just as I began to step back, the harsh squeal of brakes broke the tension, and I saw the headlights of the train piercing the darkness. Relief washed over me. The train would bring the safety of crowded cars, the noise of people, the comfort of strangers. But as it rolled to a stop, my relief faltered. The man, who had been so close, now stood squarely in front of the train doors. He didn't move, as though he were a part of the train itself, a dark shadow cast against the gleaming metal. I swallowed hard, my throat feeling tight. Should I call for help? Surely, someone would come if I shouted. But the thought of drawing attention to myself when I felt so vulnerable made me hesitate. The platform buzzed with the sounds of the train, the doors hissing open, people jostling past me, but they merely flowed around the man as if he were an immovable object, a part of the landscape, like the weathered rails beneath my feet. "Excuse me," I said, the words slipping out before I could think better of them. My voice sounded small against the clamor. He didn't respond, his shoulders twitching, mumbling incoherently, his gaze fixed somewhere in the distance. Panic clawed at me. He was blocking my entrance. I needed to think quickly, to act. I glanced around, searching the faces of the passengers who spilled out of the train. Each one seemed oblivious to my plight, too wrapped up in their own world. I took a cautious step closer, hoping to squeeze past him, but he shifted slightly, as if sensing me, and the space between us closed. "Let me through," I said, trying to inject urgency into my tone, but my voice cracked under the strain. Sweat trickled down my back, and I dared to take a half step back. The man turned his head, fixing me with a gaze that was unnaturally intense, his eyes a cloudy blue, lost behind a haze of madness. "Don't go there," he muttered, his voice low and gravelly. Each word sent a chill rippling through me. "Not safe. They'll come for you." I felt the air thicken, closing in on me. My instinct screamed to run, but my feet were rooted to the ground. What did he mean? Who were they? The urgency of the situation set my heart racing again, each beat echoing in my ears. I knew I had to make a choice. "Please," I said, desperate now, "I need to get on the train." My voice trembled, and I cursed myself for sounding weak. I had to project strength, but the man only continued to mumble, his focus shifting as if I had become part of the scenery. I took a chance, thrusting my shoulder against him, trying to push past, but he caught my wrist in a grip that felt like iron. The world around me blurred in a haze of dread as I locked eyes with him. "You don't understand," he rasped. "They are coming." I pulled back, heart thundering in my chest. I could feel the panic rising, threatening to choke me. The train was waiting, the doors open like a gaping maw, but I couldn't step inside, not while he stood like a wall in my way. I needed a distraction, something to shift his focus away from me. I searched frantically around the platform and spotted a group of passengers huddled at the far end. I called to them, my voice rising over the ambient sounds. "Help! I need help!" His grip on my wrist tightened, a frantic look crossing his face as he turned toward the sound of my plea. The shift in attention was all I needed. I yanked my arm free, the sudden movement sending a shock through my body as I darted toward the open doors of the train. I could hear his voice behind me, urgent and rising, but I didn't stop to listen. I jumped inside as the doors began to slide shut. I leaned against the cool metal of the train, chest heaving, feeling as though I had narrowly escaped something dreadful. The door sealed me inside, cutting off the sound of his mumbling, the night closing around us as the train pulled away. I took a shaky breath and looked out the window, the platform shrinking into the distance, and the man fading from view. Yet, even as the train sped away, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had been waiting out there was not finished with me. The chill of the night wrapped around me as I stood on the deserted train platform, my breath clouding the air. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a sickly hue over the cracked concrete. I had long since lost track of time. My phone, with its eerily dim screen, showed a train delay that seemed to stretch into eternity. I shoved it back into my pocket, hoping it would somehow bring back the warmth that had slowly seeped from my bones. As I shuffled from foot to foot, trying to keep warm, my gaze wandered down the platform, landing on a figure standing too close, just a few feet away. He was a wiry man, dressed in a frayed jacket, his hair unkempt and wild. He mumbled to himself, the words slipping out like whispers lost in the wind. The way he moved, shuffling his feet and twitching his fingers, set off alarms in my head. I could feel my heart rate quicken, a primal reaction that I couldn't shake. He turned slightly, and in the dim light, I caught a glimpse of his face, gaunt and unshaven, with wide, feverish eyes that darted from side to side. I tried to ignore him, focusing instead on the distant sound of an approaching train, half hoping it would whisk me away from this unease, but the man's erratic movements drew my attention back. He was now closer, still mumbling, his voice rising and falling in a rhythm that felt almost hypnotic. The sound coiled around me, tightening my chest. I could see the glint of something metallic peeking from his jacket, a flash that sent tendrils of panic creeping up my spine. The cold evening air suddenly felt claustrophobic. As the train's headlights illuminated the darkness, I felt a surge of relief. The sound of the approaching train grew louder, a rhythmic clattering that drowned out the man's muttering. I took a step forward, edging closer to the platform's edge, but the man shifted, blocking my path. The train's brakes squealed as it came to a stop, the lights blaring down on us, but I couldn't move. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. He was standing directly in front of the entrance, his stance wide, as if he had claimed that space for himself. The door slid open, and the rush of warm air pushed toward me, tempting and inviting. I glanced around, searching for other passengers, but the platform remained eerily empty, save for the two of us. "Hey!" I called out, forcing my voice to steady. "Could you step aside?" He turned to me, his eyes glinting with something I couldn't name. For a moment, he seemed to process my words, tilting his head as if thinking hard about a math equation. Then, with a disjointed motion, he laughed, an unsettling sound that reverberated through the empty space. "This is mine," he replied, voice low and gravelly. "You can't have it." My pulse raced. My instinct screamed at me to flee, but the train beckoned me with its open doors. I glanced back down the platform, weighing my options. There was no one else around. The platform felt alive with the sound of the train's machinery, yet it was devoid of human presence. I took a cautious step to the side, hoping to bypass him, but he mirrored my movement, blocking my escape. "Please," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "I just want to get on the train." He took a step closer, invading my space, and I caught the distinct scent of sweat and something rancid. "No trains tonight," he said, his smile widening, revealing teeth that looked rotted and jagged. "You don't belong here. You don't belong anywhere." A jolt of fear coursed through me. I felt cornered and desperate. The train was still there, its doors open, but I was paralyzed by his presence. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, though part of me was afraid to hear the answer. "Because," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "they don't see you either." "But I do. I see you." His eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a wave of something unsettling and chaotic sweep over me. I took a step back, my instincts kicking in. There was a gap between the last train car and the platform. I could leap for it, dive in, but the risk of falling was real. The man was now grinning, as if he could see the turmoil in my mind. With one swift motion, he reached out, his hand darting toward me, and I recoiled as adrenaline surged through me. "Get away from me!" I shouted, my voice echoing against the concrete. I could hear the whispers of my thoughts, the primal scream urging me to act, to escape. The train's doors would not remain open much longer. In that instant, desperation took over. I spun on my heel and dashed toward the edge of the platform, my heart pounding like a war drum. I could feel his presence behind me, could hear his frantic laughter rising as I leaped onto the train. I stumbled but regained my balance, slipping through the doors just as they began to close. I glanced back, finding him standing there, unmoving, eyes wide and hungry. The train lurched forward, carrying me away from the platform, from the man who had tried to ensnare me. I pressed my back against the cool metal of the train, gasping for breath. The world outside blurred into a wash of colors, but I knew that the lingering dread would follow me, deep-rooted in my mind. I had escaped the platform, but the darkness wasn't far behind.